It catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
Yes. Well, apparently,
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Great to have you join me. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you are watching us on YouTube or your connected device, listening on DAB+ radio, your smart speaker, it's great to have your company. Don't forget as well, I have to remember to say this now, I'll forget later on. You can look at us on our YouTube page, talkTV. You can watch us on video, but you can also, if you miss anything of the show, go to the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. It's a brilliant title, isn't it? We thought spent ages thinking it up. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show on YouTube, and if you miss anything, you can find it there. Hit subscribe and you will never miss a thing. Right now, though, let me tell you what's coming up in the show. We're going to be talking about Keir Starmer, reported to be preparing to water down his welfare reforms. I mean, he couldn't water them down any more than they already are in an attempt to head off a major rebellion. He's got almost 130 Labour MPs now. I think 11 or 12 committee chairs. Not the usual suspects. These are people you expect to be completely watertight with a new Labour government. But this comes also as his most senior aide, his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, his second one, by the way, in less than a year, faces a mounting backlash from backbenchers calling for regime change. Have you ever known a government be sort of collapsing before our eyes within the first year of government? Okay, other than Liz Truss. We'll give you that, other than Liz Truss. But do get in touch. I would love to hear your thoughts on Keir Starmer watering down his welfare reforms in a bid to head off that major rebellion. Is it the right thing to do to water them down? Does this tell us that, you know, he is not going to last the full 5 years? Is it about regime change at number 10? And when they talk about that, they mean the staff there. But ultimately, the staff are doing their master's bidding, aren't they? When he's not flouncing around on the world stage, of course, but sometimes, Prime Minister, you have to come back and face the music. I'd love to know your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about President Trump, or the daddy, as Mark Rutte, NATO's Secretary General, calls him. He held a great victory at the end of the NATO summit last night as leaders agreed to a new 5% target for defence spending, except it's not really all defence spending, is it? In fact, most of it probably isn't to be. But after years of attacking fellow member states for not spending enough on defence, he said he was leaving the two-day meeting thinking people love their countries and NATO apparently is not a rip-off. We're also going to be talking about just the extraordinary situation where we have migrants coming across the channel en masse. About them all this week, these sun splashes, but then working as Deliveroo drivers and the like, and everyone turning a blind eye to it. But now it emerges security sources say that Russia is behind pushing a lot of those migrants to the UK, trying to overwhelm our border defences and sow division. We'll talk about that as well. Love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, really interesting stat from the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. And it's not often anyone says that sentence, but the equivalent of one child in every school class of 30 is now an IVF baby. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I want to talk about that a little bit later with the fertility doctor. So all that coming up, plenty more besides throughout the show. Joining me for the chat throughout the show is Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer who joins us regularly on a Thursday. Very, very, very good morning.
Good morning. There's nothing going on, quite clearly.
I mean, genuinely, I've been saying...
I'll just go now.
We've been on air since 2016, and every single morning, I think I've started the show with, wow, another quiet news day then. And it never is. It never, ever is. So there's been a lot of talk about regime change in Iran. Now there's a lot of talk about a regime change in number 10. Look, first of all, let's talk about the welfare reforms themselves, OK? Now Keir Starmer reportedly is going to sort of ring around. He's going to, they're going to talk about, basically cutting back on their welfare reforms. And these are particularly to personal independence payments for people who are disabled, and sickness benefits, incapacity benefits and the like. And actually, we've seen a massive, massive upturn in the number of people who are claiming these, huge extra amounts of sums of money going out. And even the welfare reforms they're looking at, we're looking at only £5 billion less being spent on welfare than we will otherwise spend. So welfare spending is going to go up, probably around about the 13 billion mark a year by 2030, but it would be 5 billion less a year under these welfare plans. Massive rebellion. We're looking at most, Labour committee chairs. We're looking at a huge number of backbench MPs, not at all the usual difficult suspects saying, we didn't get into power to vote for winter fuel to be cut for most pensioners. You U-turned on that, and we're not in favour of cutting welfare either. Are the rebels right, or is the Prime Minister right?
Well, I think we're seeing a massive rebel penetrator instead of the massive ordnance penetrator that talked about for a regime change in Iran. From a Labour government, the welfare is everything, and a lot of Labour MPs got voted in on, we will look after you if you don't work, if you need to put your hand out and get more money, and because that's the psyche the state will provide. Now Labour government is coming in and realising that to try and balance the books, actually you have to get people back into work. They haven't quite worked out that to get people back into work you have to protect businesses as well. But
the people who provide the work?
The people who provide the work.
Philip, this is a mad, silly idea. And it will never catch up.
Yeah, well, exactly. But they're learning, and if they water it down, not another U-turn. Flip-flop Starmer and his team. They're not U-turning, they're spinning.
Well, this is the thing. These MPs, back MPs, know that he's going to U-turn. Everyone thinks he's going to U-turn. Now, Angela Rayner made it very clear, Deputy Prime Minister's questions yesterday, effectively. She basically said very clearly, yes, in answer to Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, yes, the vote will still take place next Tuesday. So they're kind of, I suppose I'm not quite sure how she could have not given that answer, but they're kind of in a bit of a bind now, aren't they? I think the vote probably will take place in some form. They're going to try and water it down. But it's untenable for a Prime Minister who's not even been in office for a full year. I mean, he'll be 2 days shy of a full year in office by the time of this vote. To lose a vote like this on what is it's not like a vote over there. It's a flagship policy. They talked about welfare reform, but also crucially, and it's a small point worth making, the moral case for this is so strong. This is supposed to be the Labour Party, that's the party for Labour, for working people. Yes, we have a welfare state, and it's supposed to be for people when they can't work, not don't want to work, choose not to work. It is not remotely feasibly possible that we have suddenly, in the last 5 years, had a massive growth in the number of people who are disabled and incapacitated and too sick to work. It's not possible. No. Oh, is it lockdown? Is it, is it COVID? Long-term illnesses? Well, that hasn't happened in any other Western country. So no, it's people who could work, who should work, who aren't working. And it's really, really that simple. And we need to get those people back to work. And if you're the Party of Labour, you should believe in that. The moral duty to work, the moral benefit of working, from going out to work, doing a good day's work, earning money, it doesn't matter how rubbish the job, self-esteem and dignity of work is absolutely crucial. One of my biggest concerns about AI is the idea, people won't have to work anymore. I don't think that's good for human beings. I think we need to have a purpose in life.
AI will just bring in different work. But I think there's a different symptom here that is even more worrying. I agree with everything you say from a work perspective, but every policy the government got itself elected on is bringing in, it's now changing. Yeah. It says it's a government for growth.
There weren't that many policies, to be fair. It was
they didn't have any plans, but they are changing everything. They've just had a strategic defence review that was based on 2.5% going to 3% at some stage in the next Parliament. And then less than 2 weeks later, Keir Starmer signs up to 5%.
But OK, but events, dear boy, events.
No, events hadn't changed.
I know the facts on the ground haven't changed, but, the pressure from
events hadn't changed dramatically by then. And we, in talk with Ted, the producer, had actually quizzed the Minister of Defence on this beforehand. And they said, no, we're not going to do this. And of course, then they do it. And you look at every other policy, you were based on growth. Well, businesses have been attacked. This government doesn't know what it's doing. And don't talk to me about gangs.
Yeah.
And smashing
exactly.
them.
The level of incompetence, just talking about that with Mike, the level of incompetence is beyond,
off the scale.
It's just beyond understanding, isn't it? I mean, we're already looking at his second chief of staff in less than a year. People are talking about ousting Morgan McSweeney. People say, well, he's the man. The minister's coming out and defending him. He's the man who won us this amazing landslide victory. No, the Tories won you the landslide victory.
Yes.
People, you got 33 and a bit of the vote, 30%. Yeah. You did not win a landslide victory. The Tories had a landslide defeat.
Right. And Nigel helped.
And Nigel Farage helped. Well, and again, note these latest polls. I mean, we're going to be talking about this a bit later with Fraser Nelson, who's got a documentary on air tonight. And he's, question is, will Nigel Farage be the next Prime Minister? Yeah. And we've had a couple of polls now putting them, well over 30%, even, well over enough under a four-party system with Lib Dems doing really well as well. Tories only marginally above them. But Reform's been the leading party for quite a long while now, consistently and growing constantly, but also, absolutely importantly, getting past a point where they can actually win a serious number of seats, not just 5. They could be winning, 150 plus, even more. They're looking at this is a new poll. This is a YouGov MRE poll. So the multi-level regression and post-stratification polls. No, basically, instead of just saying an opinion poll of 2,000 people around the country and then extrapolating that and saying, well, if they won this across the board, in every constituency, they would win. That's silly because different constituencies have different numbers of voters. Votes. Labour are going to have a load of votes that pile up in one constituency, but it doesn't help them anywhere else, for instance. But this is a poll where they make all the allowances for that. And they reckon that currently, if there was a vote, general election tomorrow, Reform UK would win 271 seats. They would be the biggest party. The next biggest would be Labour on 178. I mean, more than half of what it would, well, less than half than what it won last year. Tories would be down in fourth place with just 46 MPs. And they would be below the Lib Dems, who they reckon would have 81 MPs. I mean, we are talking about a seismic change in British politics. Possibly, let's face it, a Reform Tory coalition, but it would be Reform as the majority party, as the senior party in that. Do you think that Keir Starmer gets it?
I don't think he does. I don't think he gets it. I don't think Kemi Badenoch gets it. But I don't think the mainstream parties get the sea change that's happening across politics, because the Reform are coming in and they just see them as a flash in the pan, and by the time the next election comes in, they'll disappear. But we've also got an awful lot of noise on the left for a Corbynista type party to break away from Labour, which will affect those statistics. And we could be
They're being squeezed on both sides.
We could be
as the Tories are, Lib Dems in Reform, Labour, the Gaza Party.
I think we're on the cusp of seeing a sea change in politics in this country, which actually is no bad thing. It'd be good shape.
I would absolutely. I mean, again, I voted for Brexit in 2016, and we're just over the anniversary, the 9-year anniversary of that. People say we didn't get proper Brexit. Yes, we did. Our national sovereignty is and our democratic accountability of our governments is crucial. And the reason I voted for it wasn't about economics. It wasn't even about specifically immigration. It was about when our government does things I don't agree with, I've got the right to kick them out. I can't kick out the European Commission or MEPs in European Parliament because our bunch of British MPs have no say over anything. And so it's absolutely crucial for me. So here's the thing. Tories got kicked out because they did not do what they expressly said they would do and voters demanded they do. Labour get kicked out because they will not do what voters have told them they want them to do. You can keep not doing it, politicians, but voters will not allow you to stay in office. And if you all just want to have your little merry-go-round, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in office, that's great. You keep doing that. We will keep voting you out.
And Keir Starmer hasn't read what he said to the British public to get the votes and undermine the Tories. He's actually doing the same, but he's doing it better than the Tories did. So you know, he's worse than they are. He's worse than they are. That's why he's doing it better. He's better at being bad.
His argument is, you know, I'm not as bad as the last lot.
No, he's better at being worse.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on now. Look, this is interesting. Now, this ties in, again, all these issues, the welfare issue, and again, we have no money. We also have no money for defence spending. What did you make of the NATO summit? It was so geared around Trump, Daddy Trump as he's known now. So geared around keep Trump happy, keep it short because he's got a short attention span, make him feel the love. Even Mark Rutte, who's actually a long-time friend of for quite some years of Donald Trump, they got on very well. He was appointed Secretary General. He's an operator. He's a very smooth operator, but it's clear, you know, he knows how to charm and smooth. We saw that text message. I read it out in air yesterday. It was just, I mean, I think it was written by AI. I thought they did a joke like, how would one write a text message to Donald Trump? But Trump hailed it as a great victory that he's got this 5% commitment from not most but not all members of NATO. Everyone's gone away saying yes, yes, yes. But it is all smoke and mirrors, isn't it? 3.5% is the target for defence spending, and then it's security spending, very much tied into the issue of, you know, border security. We'll come to that in a moment. But I don't think that we're really any safer today, tomorrow, or will be in 5 years than we were yesterday.
We're not. You know, the text of the NATO statement that came out of it and what Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, said is pretty important, and it was underpinning the industrial base and increasing the manufacturing capability. If that happens, then we are in a stronger position. But the noises that are coming out of the different governments and everything else, and frankly, the Let's All Worship Donald Club, which the whole meeting was, was almost embarrassing. There was so much coming out.
Oh, and it is. I mean, it is embarrassing. But if that's the only way of dealing with him, and he pays for 50% of the NATO budget, and you need him to be engaged in Israel and Ukraine and with NATO. What do you do? Well, what do you do? I mean, you can stand firm and go, I refuse to kowtow to this man baby. And I'm sorry, even though I said I would have voted for him last November over Kamala Harris, he does still have man baby traits that he needs to have his ego stroked in an absurd way.
He does, but again, there's other sensible statements that came out. Mark Rutte not calling Donald Trump daddy, but
I'll play that clip in a moment. By the way.
But whenever he was talking about, you know, the European countries of NATO having 20 times the defence budget than Russia, but they're making more tanks and shells than we are.
Point.
The Russian economy is smaller than the British economy. Yeah. Their industrial output for defence is beating ours hands down.
But then they are in a full hot war.
No, they're doing that beforehand. So we are getting things wrong.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't say them all. We're going to talk to the former Defence Secretary Liam Fox in a few moments, and I will play those clips of the daddy conversations in just a moment. But I do want to get onto the migrant crisis, because it is absolutely fascinating that not only does, you know, this NATO spending allow for, again, infrastructure, like reinforcing bridges to carry. I mean, that shouldn't be part of our defence infrastructure. really, but also allowing a border security to be funded as part of this 5% of commitment of GDP. But the Sun had done some brilliant splashes this week about the migrant crisis, particularly migrant workers, people turning up from the boats 2 hours after they arrive in the asylum hotel. They've got themselves a sort of subcontracted license to go and be a Deliveroo or an Uber Eats or a Just Eat rider, and they're making money. They're not paying tax on it. No one is, because they're all self-employed. They're not in the system. And we're funding their asylum hotels to the tune of billions, and they're earning money illegally. And again, it's a massive pull factor. But here's the thing, there's also a push factor. And as the Sun exposes today, security sources are saying, look, it's Putin's Russia, and there'll be other hostile nations as well, like China, like Iran and others, who are basically pushing these migrant gangs and enabling them, giving them safe passage, because we absolutely love a load of illegal immigrants arriving on European shores, destabilising European governments, moving to Britain, destabilising Britain. They know it's a massive cost to us. It destabilises us. They can get their own operatives, terrorists in. We know there's a court case that's going to be coming ahead of, and I think 2 or 3 of those are believed to is an alleged terror plot involving Iran, and 2 or 3 of those are believed to have arrived, as asylum seekers onto migrant boats. This is a massive concern, that our lax border security is not only a risk to us for crime and the cost to us as taxpayers, and risk to our young women from sex assaults, which have gone up in these areas, but from literally our national security is at risk.
Hostile nations. Tell me something I didn't know. This was a thread in a novel that I wrote with a good friend called Keith Turnbull. We published it 3 years ago.
There you are. That's why we have him on.
It was the Russian GRU and SVR taking people from refugee camps and infiltrating them for organised crime purposes into the UK in particular. We've known about this for years.
Because why wouldn't they exploit that? I mean, we know they do the cyber crime. Yep. We know all over social media. I mean, the Russian bots, the Chinese bots, the Iranian-funded Islamist extremist bots. They're all over the place.
A, they're making lots of money out of it. B, they know it's costing an awful lot of political capital. C, they know it's costing our economy hugely, and that's money that can't then be put to welfare, so it causes more political issues. It can't be put to defence, so that causes more political issues. It is an open goal, and the Russians and others have been exploiting this for a long time.
What a surprise. Can I just get to one other story, non-political, although of course our taxes are paying for the fat jabs to be rolled out over a few years to the people with a BMI of over 40. Properly, you're properly obese at that point, but also with other health issues, which you almost certainly have at that weight. But what a surprise. Imagine everyone's surprised. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, catchy title, MHRA, they have warned about the safety of fat jabs after hundreds of Britons developed pancreatitis, and 10 people died of it, associated with, not necessarily caused by. Again, bearing in mind, a lot of the people who are taking these jabs are already not very healthy. However, I said from word go, and the evidence from the studies, there's no such thing as a completely safe medicine when enough people, 1.5 million Brits, believed to be on these jabs now, mostly on private prescriptions, of some getting them on the internet, which is mad. And what a surprise, they're not all safe.
Yeah. You're 100% right. Medicines have side effects. But let me put this into context and numbers. 560 Brits have had these side effects. 100 have died.
560.
Sorry, 10 have died.
10 have died.
The fat jabs deal with people with type 2 diabetes. Let's look in this country, the numbers there. 4.4 million, 86%, and the fat jabs are successful in 86% of people. That would make...
No, they're not. No, it's 70% max.
I'm going by what was in our papers here. That means that 3,784,000 people will benefit from it. Of those, type 2 diabetes is linked in 65% of cases to heart disease and death. That's 2.46 million people are benefiting, yet there's 560 aren't.
No, they're only benefiting. They're only benefiting
if they get the jab.
If they lose the weight and keep the weight off.
Yes.
And on average, only 70% of people lose weight, and in their own studies, and they lose on average 10% of their weight. Well, if you have got a BMI of 40, you can lose 10% of your weight just by giving up your beef. No, by giving up one latte a week.
Yes.
I'm sorry, one latte a day for a while. I think these numbers are not going to add up. I've been saying it from word go. You could also, by the way, you could lose weight and get healthy. You don't have any of these side effects. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the stories we are talking about. Do get in touch, in particular about Keir Starmer set to water down these welfare reforms. He's in a bid to try and head off a major rebellion by almost 130 Labour MPs. Some are calling for regime change at number 10. What's your reaction to all of that? Would you like the welfare reforms to go further? Would you like them to be watered down? Should they be dropped altogether? Should they completely stand firm? And do you think this is threatening to topple possibly Keir Starmer's government? Really? Is it a vote of no confidence effective next Tuesday? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Many of the migrants that come here, they're coming here, they're fleeing countries that we've wandered into, whether it be Libya, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, even Iran now as well. We've bombed the hell out of Iran, but there's no follow-up plan.
Well, yeah, but we haven't bombed.
Hang
on, Tobias, hang on. We haven't bombed the hell out of Iran at all. You know, as the government will tell you, nothing to do with us. We didn't do anything to do with the bombing of Iran.
What I'm saying is from a Western perspective, then that's what's happened.
Yeah, but they're not fleeing. They're not fleeing Iran because we bombed it. Is my point.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:27 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Before we go to calls, let's go to some of your texts and tweets coming in about this welfare reform bill. It's supposed to be voted on in Parliament next Tuesday. We've got 130 best part of Labour MPs basically saying, we ain't voting for this. That'll wipe out the working majority of 156 that Labour have in the House of Commons. And we're looking at Keir Starmer saying to water down those welfare reforms. I mean, I don't know how you can water them down anymore. They barely do anything at all. What's your reaction to that, especially as some MPs apparently, and even some ministers, talking about regime change in number 10? Not necessarily involving the Prime Minister, but certainly his aides. Can he lose another Chief of Staff within a year of taking office? Gavin says Starmer needs to go. He's damaged goods. The country hates him and his arrogance. He just wants to jet around the world, drunk on power, picking fights with the most vulnerable like the farmers. He has to go. Gavin, get off the fence, love. Charlie says, Keir is more loathed by the day and his oblivion is coming fast. David says the PM has a jelly spine. Michael says Starmer's a joke figure, as is every other politician. And David said, this comes as no surprise. Starmer can't make a decision. And Simon says, Captain U-turn strikes again. I have to say, it's interesting. I mean, he does seem to be really detested. For a fairly sort of Blamond-type man, he's remarkably detested on all sides, both left and right, isn't he? Let's go to the phone lines. George is on the line in Dundee. And George, what do you want to say? Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Well, I'd like to say I'm delighted that these changes have been watered down as a start. Hopefully they can stop them altogether.
Why?
Why? Well, can I put my circumstances?
Yeah, please do.
It's probably, I just try to work out in my head, around about 40% of me and my good lady's income is in her PIP and my, Scottish adult disability in our case, and my carer's allowance.
Yep.
If she loses that, That's 40%.
And why would she lose that, do you think, under the reforms? Because it's all about like the points you get. You have to have 4 points in any particular category at least to be eligible.
I'll try and explain it.
Okay,
to you,
briefly.
Yeah, she has one descriptor where she has 4 points. She has 8 other descriptors, I think, where she's got 2 or 3 points. So she's well over the threshold. My wife takes a seizure every single day. There's not been a day in the last 15 years where she's not.
So of course she can't work, and of course she needs a carer.
No, Julia, you say that. That's not the way it works when it comes up to review.
Right.
When there's this, what you would call thirst to get disabled people, because they cast a huge net, a massive net, and if there's 1 or 2 dolphins caught up in the net, so what?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's no reform, there's no legislation, there's no payment, welfare payment that's perfect. But if you have 4 points in anything, then you should still be eligible for it. I mean, we need to look.
But Julia, people lose their 4 points because DWP staff and these assessors are put under pressure to knock people down from the 4 points to the 2 points.
Okay, but if that were the case, how come so many more people have been getting it in recent years? There's been an explosion. 1,000 more people every day are getting eligible for eligibility.
I think you agree with us because the stupid government locked everybody in their houses during COVID, told them all to be frightened of being ill, and then told them that all had mental illness.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but it happened in other countries too, and they've not got a massive explosion in their disability claimants.
But because they've not got the same here. Where see in Scotland, for example, it is easier to claim Scottish adult disability than it is in PIP. The Scottish government kind of, like Maggie Thatcher's government in the 80s, encouraged people on the incapacity benefit.
Yeah, to hide the unemployment. Yeah.
The masses unemployment. The Scottish government are massaging the disability figures to try and claim more in grant from the UK government.
That would make a lot of sense. George, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very, very much indeed. Unfortunately, I do have to go to a break right now. I'm actually going to raise this with our next guest, Sir Liam Fox. He's a former Defence Secretary of the Conservatives, but he's also a former GP himself. I wonder what he makes of all of this. We'll talk about all of that. We're also going to be talking about this amazing statistic that 1 in 30 babies are now born via IVF. That means basically 1 child in every classroom on average is an IVF baby. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? We'll talk about that in a few moments. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:34 is the time. Just waiting to speak to Sir Liam Fox, former Defence Secretary, about where we are with NATO. In fact, actually, before we do that, why don't we take advantage of the time and we'll play some of the clips of, because I'm sure Sir Liam will have seen these rather interesting clips. This is what happened at NATO yesterday. And this is a conversation that Donald Trump was having with the NATO Secretary-General, Mark Rutte. Where some interesting language was used, rather less choice language, should we say, than was used in that press conference the other day, Philip Ingram. But there we are. Let's have a little watch and listen to that clip.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
get
it
to use strong. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
So, so Daddy, now I have to say, I thought Mark Rutte saying, you know, Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get stopped. He didn't call Donald Trump Daddy. He carried on the analogy, but he was asked about this, Donald Trump, at the press conference. Rather, God, it went on for ages, but some very interesting answers at that press conference last night at the end of NATO. Let's have a watch and listen to that.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you Daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Yeah, the daddy thing is carried on, Philip, and to the extent that Philip Ingram, the former senior military intelligence officer, still with me if you're just joining me, to the extent that actually they tweeted out after Donald Trump arrived home, Daddy's home. Yeah. I think this one's going to stay around.
It is. That's a funny one. I think Mark Rutte lost something in translation because, of course, English isn't his first language, but he's fluent in it.
Better than most of us.
He does. And Debs Haynes, who's a good friend, she picked up on it, and I think her question was masterful in bringing Donald Trump out and continuing the tittering that's going on in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's probably a fair analysis of the situation, is it not? Well, let's talk about all of this, rather more serious matters, with Sir Liam Fox, former Conservative Defence Secretary, joins us on the line. Very good morning to you, Liam.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, just on that exchange we've just been playing, what did you make of I mean, it was just an analogy that Trump was using that Mark Rutte picked up on, but Donald Trump is clearly enjoying it. But actually, there's quite a lot of truth in that sort of daddy analogy, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. It's a playful aside, and I think it's pretty pathetic that that's become the main story from what was one of the most important NATO summits. And I think I'm afraid it shows a total trivialization in parts of the media that it was a funny aside. Yeah. This is not the main story.
No, of course it's not the main story. We have been discussing for quite some time on this show the main story, which is our need to be able to defend ourselves and our allies, and I would say also the likes of Israel and Ukraine. And they're certainly being played as a win by Donald Trump that he'd got this commitment from not all but most countries, and he was making it very clear. I mean, Spain, I don't think they ain't going to get some very good trade deals coming very soon when it comes to their refusal to go up to 5% of GDP on defence. But it's not really what it sounds like on, in the headlines, because it's 3.5% on defence, and it's, by by later this decade, and the 5% is by 2035. And it's actually a lot of it is border security and things like that, which come normally out of Home Office budgets and the like. Are we doing enough to defend our nation states, our allies, from the clear and obvious danger posed by countries like Russia, Iran and China?
Well, you make a very good point there, Julia. And of course, NATO is both a military and a political alliance. And what we saw very much yesterday was the political side of that, showing unity of purpose in committing to those figures. You're completely correct that within those figures, there's a fair amount of smoke and mirrors. It's not just about defense spending, as we normally talk about, but defense and security spending. And even within the defense spending itself, it's extending the definition somewhat to bring in areas that we wouldn't traditionally regard as being part of pure defense. There are some positives to take from it. I think that European NATO is finally, belatedly, recognizing that it must carry more of the load of collective defense in NATO. I think that's driven by countries like Poland, for example, the new German government very much, and of course with Finland and Sweden being there. So there's a realization that this is an urgent problem that needs to be addressed. I think for the United Kingdom, of course, we start way ahead of most in being the 6th biggest military in the world. But I think, as you and I have discussed on this program before, it's not just what we spend, it's what we spend it on. And each of those NATO countries could spend more money. They could spend it on more manpower without giving any greater collective capability to NATO. And what is necessary from the European part of NATO is that they sit down and work out what they need to do, each of them, given that no country in Europe has a big enough economy to provide full spectrum defense. What roles will they play as a genuine alliance? What capabilities will they bring to that?
And we bring the nuclear umbrella, which is a big part of our defence spending, but we don't have a very large, army, for instance. So different countries provide different resources.
Well, so for the United Kingdom, we are a maritime nation. 94% of our trade goes by sea routes. We therefore require the ability to maintain the security of the global maritime network. We have a nuclear deterrent. So it's quite right, I think, that if we're bringing not only that, but we're bringing carrier strike capability with our new carriers, which no other country in European NATO actually has, which is able to be interoperable with the US Marine Corps, we're bringing something different there. It is unreasonable to expect the United Kingdom to provide the nuclear deterrent, carrier strike, the cyber capabilities that we have, and our expeditionary forces, to also have an army that is capable of being the land defences for Europe. That is what Germany and France and Poland and other countries will need to bring to the alliance. The British taxpayers cannot be expected to carry the greater burden of that. So I think that is the conversation we have to have. Mark Russe's real task is going to be getting those European countries to be coordinated in what they actually bring to collective defence. Not just about the numbers, how you spend the numbers.
Exactly. And Philip Ingram was just making a point a little bit earlier about, in terms of what Russian economy, in a hot war in Ukraine at the current time, through their choice, but it's basically a military economy at the moment, but what they're spending, with a much smaller economy, I think smaller economy than Italy's, that they are able to be churning out a huge amount of military hardware, way more than much bigger economies are doing. We don't spend the money we spend very well.
Well, this is the Russian problem at the moment. 45% of the GDP is being diverted into the military or the war in Ukraine. That leaves the wealth-creating bit of their economy much smaller. And it's much easier to translate a peace economy into a war economy than vice versa. The Russian base rate's 21%, their inflation rate's 11%. That would be intolerable in a democracy. The banking system is effectively bankrupt, and their fiscal rules are all bent. They can't maintain this for any period of time. And one of the conversations we should be having in the West is, how do we use our economic strength to outlast Russia?
Well, for a start, we need to make sure those sanctions are working properly. So instead of saying, we won't export anything or buy anything from Russia, not allowing third-party countries, the Stans, India and the others, to just basically to use their, buy our stuff or buy their stuff and sell it and become the middleman. We could stop that.
We also have unintended consequences of our sanctions. For example, what we should be trying to encourage is capital flight out of Russia. And yet the sanction structure makes it very difficult for any of the oligarchs to put their money
out
into Europe. And, we need to rethink that. We need to be having a combination of an economic strategy in dealing with Russia's war machine, as well as the political and military.
Did you detect, lots of focus has been on Iran and Israel lately, but of course the war, Gaza sort of went off the agenda for a bit, Ukraine has been off the agenda. I know Zelensky was at the NATO meeting, desperate to become a member of NATO, that not looking likely on the cards at all. Did you detect a softening, though, in Donald Trump's stance on Ukraine? There was certainly a sympathetic exchange with a reporter. I don't know whether you could read anything into that, who's from Ukraine, and her husband is fighting on the front line there. But did you detect at all that there's more likelihood that Donald Trump is coming round to the idea that, that Ukraine needs the same sort of help that Israel needs?
Well, there's a pattern of behaviour. George W. said that he looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul, but he was soon, enlightened to the reality of Putin. I remember David Cameron doing the same. Emmanuel Macron did the same. President Obama did the same. All decent people eventually come to the conclusion that you cannot do business with Vladimir Putin. You know, once KGB, always KGB. And I think Donald Trump's coming to that same conclusion, that however much you want to do business and however much it might be beneficial to do business with Putin, you cannot do it. He cannot be accommodated. And I think that Donald Trump, I think, has handled the Iranian situation very well. Yeah. I think he made it, people wondered what were his policies. His policies were Israel has a right to exist. Iran will not get a nuclear bomb. The Abraham Accords are the best way forward diplomatically for the region, and people wondered whether he meant it. Well, now they know that he did.
They know he did. And it's interesting, actually, after all that fuss and to-do about an internal government report suggesting that Iran's nuclear capability only been put back by a matter of months rather than obliterated, as Donald Trump claimed. I don't think you're ever going to obliterate any nuclear capability. But now a CIA report sort of backing up Donald Trump, saying there has been a serious impact on Iran's nuclear capability, which surely the whole world should welcome.
And Israel coming up with a similar conclusion. I think that what they'll determine is that the Iranian nuclear program has probably been put back years, that it would cost a huge amount of money that Iran doesn't have to reconstitute it, and that there are signs of changes in attitude in the Iranian hierarchy. Against that, we know that they probably moved their stocks of uranium somewhere else. Yeah. They could restart the program. Maybe, just maybe, there's a chink of light here in terms of getting a change in attitude, if not immediately from the current Iranian leadership, from some kind of not revolution, but evolution of what is happening there. And I think that Donald Trump he read the signals well in terms of Iran's response to his attack on the nuclear facilities. And I think that he has actually been a force for tremendous good here in holding back, particularly what would have been, I think, a disastrous Israeli response that would have been disproportionate. So I think the president goes back to Washington very much strengthened internationally and probably domestically too.
Yeah, indeed. It's been very interesting. Can I just ask you about a completely different story? We've been talking about this all this morning. As a former GP yourself by training, before you went into politics, big ongoing debate about welfare reform. Prime Minister reported to be watering down his welfare reform. It's coming for a vote next Tuesday with up to 130 Labour MPs, backbenchers saying, we're just not going to vote for it. We're going to basically make it not happen. He's under an awful lot of pressure. Leaving aside the politics of that, as a former GP, someone who'd have patients coming in unable to work or incapacitated or needing help for independent life, needing things like PIP, personal independence payments. Do you think those reforms go too far? Should they be watered down or should they be strengthened?
No, I think the government, in fact, is on the right course here in terms of bringing down our welfare bill. The idea that people in Britain are much more unhealthy and more of them are disabled than ever before, given that the sort of society we live in, is untenable. I think that we cannot afford a welfare bill because the welfare bill of this size actually crowds out funding we need in other places, including healthcare itself, including in education and including in defence. And I think that an addiction to welfare has probably done more to harm Western states than any actions from any of our enemies. I think an addiction to welfarism is an enfeebling process that actually makes people too dependent on the state and diminishes personal responsibility. And if the only value you know you've got is what the state gives you for doing nothing, how can you know what value you could be to yourself, your family, and your community? There's a big moral debate to be had here on welfare, as well as the numbers. The government is quite right, and they're suffering, of course, from the fact that they've got such a big majority with lots of people who never expected to be in Parliament, and I'm perfectly sure Keir Starmer never expected to have in Parliament either. No,
indeed. Absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Sir Liam Fox, former Conservative Defence Secretary, former GP, asking him about that. Thank you very much. Brief word from Philip Ingram.
I just want to correct Sir Liam on a couple of things. The French have got a carrier strike capability. It's not fifth generation, doesn't integrate with the Americans as well.
He did make that proviso that can interact with the Americans.
Exactly, but it's currently deployed in Mission Clemenceau 25 in the Pacific, and the Italians have got a very limited capability.
OK, all right then. All right, Mr. Mr. Pedant in the corner there. 10:40. We do facts on the show. 10:48 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to a consultant in reproductive medicine about this amazing stat that basically, on average, in any class of 30 kids right now, 1 in 30 will be IVF. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? This is Talk.
Yeah, no, I think it's a common misconception. I think a lot of people do think that actually it is illegal for first cousins to get married because of the obvious concerns around, and everybody knows it, there's sort of Habsburg monarchs from Spain and everything like that, and those issues that happen around health. But it's not illegal. It was illegal for hundreds and hundreds of years in the UK until Henry VIII decided to marry the sister or the cousin of his then wife. So it was actually done in a very strange way.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 10:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. And let's talk about an extraordinary new statistic that's come out from the HFEA. They're the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. They keep an abreast of all sort of IVF and fertility work in the country and what's safe, what's not, what works, what doesn't, and how many people are actually using it. And they've come up with an amazing statistics. Nearly 21,000 babies were born after IVF fertility treatment in 2023. The last year of which we've got full data. That means that in an average class of 30 kids, one child in every British class is born as a result of IVF treatment. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Hippocrates Cyrus. He's a consultant in reproductive medicine and the director of King's Fertility. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So is this a statistic we should welcome or be worried about?
Well, I wouldn't worry about it. About 1 in 6 couples struggle to conceive, and for many, IVF can be a life-changing option. Of course, it's important to understand that it's not a guarantee, and especially as success declines with age. However, just to give you even more startling statistic, although we say that in the UK now 3.1% of all babies born are born through IVF, actually this is quite low compared to some of European counterparts. So in Denmark, it's 11%. That's about 1 in 10 babies.
Wow.
In Belgium, it's 5% as well. So unless obviously we assume that for some reason, women in Denmark have more fertility problems, actually it just shows that there is a gap between what is the real need and actually what is occurring and happening
as someone
in the UK. So it sounds a lot.
No, exactly. Well, as someone who did IVF in my early 40s, when you got a very low chance of having a baby from that, after I'd had my daughter naturally, I did 3 rounds, all failed. I came to terms that had to splash a hell of a lot of cash to get that. Wasn't eligible on the NHS. And many women, many couples can't get NHS help. So we know there's much bigger demand. But isn't the issue here that actually, when you say 1 in 6 couples struggle to conceive, the main reason most couples aren't able to conceive naturally is because both the woman and the man actually are too old, and that we've got a massive issue in this country where young women are and I know so many young women, I'm evangelical on this, are absolutely convinced that they don't even have to think about starting to try and have a baby until their mid-30s, when in fact that is probably for many women the last point at which they can have a baby. And we need to start having an educational programme for men and women, I think from childhood onwards, to say you need to start having babies sooner if you want to have a family.
So you've said many things which are correct there, and I'd like to unpick some of it. So you're correct that while IVF is a powerful tool in our fertility treatment arsenal, it should never replace proper family planning or fertility education. And women and men need to be clear and have accurate information about how fertility changes over time and what current treatments can and cannot do. And it's important to say that knowledge is key to making these informed decisions. It's also important to say that the average age of women having children in the UK has steadily gone up over the decades. It's now 31. The average age for having IVF is 35 and above, which obviously is above the sort of natural optimal time for conceiving. But it's also important to say, and I think this is quite a crucial point with a lot of the policies you were talking before about the social welfare bill and the rest, is that currently in the UK, we have about 1.44 babies born per woman, which is below the replacement level of 2.1, which means we're having fewer younger people who will be able to look after more and more older people, a smaller tax base. And actually, this is a proper issue that is way beyond just what justice is. It's actually a societal.
Yeah, we've covered this many times on the show. It's a crisis in the whole of the West and indeed the East, isn't it?
And unfortunately, it's not just about provision of IVF. Even in countries where, like Denmark, where they have a lot of use of IVF and a lot of it is actually on their national health service, they also have and in Sweden, very sort of similar sort of declining birth rates. So it's not just about IVF. It's not just about, simple, possibly simple policies like more paternity and maternity leave like in Sweden. It's much more deep than that. And I think that is something that we all have to come together and think.
There's lots of issues about housing costs, student debts and people settling down. There are lots of issues there. But the reality is most people want to have family. Most women want to have a family. And a huge number of people are not going to have a family. And a lot of them are relying, and I know so many women who say, well, I've frozen some eggs, so I'm just going to have a baby when I'm at the peak of my career at 38, 40 or whatever, when the reality is that IVF doesn't actually have the level of success as a rate of success that a lot of people think it has.
So you're absolutely right. So on average, about a third of IVF cycles will be successful. But again, that is an average. So when you look at breaking it down across sort of age groups, if you're less than 35, that goes up to 40-something%. But actually, if you're 43 to 44, that is actually 5%. And beyond that, with own eggs, it can actually just approach zero as well. So although the tool is there, it doesn't mean necessarily works. As we just saw, there is a difference between when people come to use IVF, which is over 35, and how successful it is, which is less than 35 as well. So there is that sort of mismatch of communication and information that we need to give out there to people so they can make their own informed decisions.
But also, I mean, expense of it. I mean, again, a lot of people, when they talk about the cost of it, actually they're not including all the drugs. I mean, I remember at one point I was on £250 worth of drugs a day. I mean, it was so, because I was so much older than the amount of drugs, it was so expensive and so. But also, I mean, I remember Professor Robert Winston made this point as a fertility expert. He said he's been in, cancer clinics, he's been in, IVF clinics, and he said if you want to talk about the most miserable, traumatised people, it's people in IVF clinics, because the roller coaster, the up and the down, it's really very unpleasant experience. That jabbing yourself constantly every day, non-stop. Blood tests and things like it's kind of almost like a full-time job. And I just think so many women are counting on this as a future, and the men are happy to go, I'll settle down when I feel like it. And actually, a lot of people are looking at how they're having only one child when they would have preferred more, like me, or not having any children at all. And it's not just an economic disaster; it is for the country. It's just a personal disaster for people, because having children is one of the greatest joys in life.
Well, for many, obviously, there are a number of people who don't want to, but it is true to say that for the majority, that is correct. And it's also true to say exactly how you pointed there, that even having one child does not necessarily mean that people have reached what the reproductive sort of, wants and needs. So I do hear quite a lot of people saying, oh, you already have a child, why do you want a second one? Don't be selfish. I say that's a little bit, it is quite the smugness of those that have. There is no rule to say you're allowed to have 1, 2 or 3. It's what you want to have. And I think it's important to also point out there, when people think about IVF, is a lot of the times people think about that first sort of child. But of course, if they want to have a larger family, then it goes without saying that you have to start younger and earlier to try to achieve that sort of family size that you want. And again, that's part of the education that is required. And when it comes down to obviously funding and cost, what's also quite sad is that the proportion of a funded sort of on the NHS IVF cycle has gone down with time. So while it used to be 35%, so about a third of all cycles in 2019 were funded by the National Health Service, that's now dropped to 27%.
Yeah. So again,
I can only see one way that's going.
It's a huge. I mean, it's a huge cost. It's a huge emotional drain. And again, but there's having sex and unprotected sex earlier in life would be a simpler solution. Dr. Hippocrates Saris, really good to talk to you. He's consultant in reproductive medicine. Thank you so much for joining us. Philip Ingram, what do you make of this?
Well, I'm torn on it. As a woman, you have to take lots of drugs. You've just criticised taking drugs for.
To have baby as opposed to fat jabs, which you don't need.
But the drugs have side effects. It's allowing parents to be older. We're seeing a surge in children with ADHD and autism and various other bits and pieces. Is there a link? There's so much more we need to know about this.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's why I'm just not entirely sure. I mean, I want everyone who wants a kid to be, who can afford to have a kid, to be able to have a kid. But I'm thinking we need to be giving people the right advice. And the right advice is you need to be having children younger, but we need to make that possible for so many couples who do want kids. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Lots more to talk about. This is Talk.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. You've no idea. I've been ranting at the team the whole way through that news break about everyone needs to start making babies. I think the boss is going to be a bit cross with me when everyone's off on maternity. To be fair, we've had 2 Talk babies in the last 6 months or so, and very beautiful these little girls are as well. 2 Talk babies. Very excited. you know, it's something in the water. Anyway, hi, I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense and encouraging people to have more babies. We are, of course, on Talk, and you can listen on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watch on YouTube or your connected device, whichever way. It's great to have your company. I'm with you all the way until 1. So is Philip Ingram. He's former senior military intelligence officer, but he's so clever and so brilliant, he knows his stuff. He can't work his way out of the studio because we've locked the door. Can't find the key. So much to talk about, but it is interesting. You know what? We, just talking about the IVF and fertility issues, and it was something interesting that the doctor pointed out, and was something we've talked about on the show an awful lot about, the population crisis and the fertility crisis going on in pretty much the whole of the Western world. Not in parts of the world where we perhaps might be concerned about the huge population increase. And when we talk about defence and we talk about various policies here, when you ignore the major existential crisis that is depopulation and a ageing population and a fewer and fewer children being born, you kind of almost ignore like the elephant in the room. You tackle this migrant crisis, you tackle a bit of housing, you tackle a bit of spending on defence. You're ignoring this existential crisis in the West and in Japan and other countries.
Well, as we get older as well, you're not getting the numbers of young people coming through to fulfil the jobs that are needed to pay the taxes that'll pay for everyone else, and people leaving it till later in life to start to have families. They don't realise the wider impact. And
it ties in, of course, with welfare reform, which is another one of the topics talking about again. Like, we need everybody needs to be working. We need more. We've got fewer working age adults as a result of lower fertility to look after the elderly people and pay for all our services. So you need more of those people to be working. We've got fewer of them working now than we used to. So like 1 in 8 on disability benefits. So we're going to have to pay more in tax. Pay more in tax, but people won't. The more people have to pay in tax, the more people think that working's not worth. You are in a vicious circle. Yep. All of these big crises are all coming together in one place. I mean, I'm kind of welcoming the wake-up call that the West is getting, because we've been floating around going, everything's fine, aren't we doing well? Yeah, we're not. No, we're really not. You may have noticed that if you're a regular listener or watcher to Talk TV, you'll know perfectly well that things are not going fine in this country. They're not going fine number 10 either, with Keir Starmer reported to be preparing to water down his welfare reforms. This is an attempt to head off a major rebellion. Almost 130 Labour MPs, about I think 11 or 12 of them are committee chairs. We are talking about senior figures, and there's also calls for regime change at number 10, with Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, his second in a year, facing a mounting backlash from bank benchers. I mean, we're talking about incompetence, we're talking about a lack of spine, and we are talking about just abject failure of leadership, are we not? But I want to know, particularly from you, what your reaction is to that. Should there be regime change in number 10? Is the problem the policy? Is the policy of welfare reform on disability benefits, is it going too far? I would say not far enough. Is it going... is it not far enough? Is it just right? Should he stand firm? Does this say anything about the crisis of leadership and authority that Keir Starmer is having, even within the first year of his election, a huge landslide victory in terms of his parliamentary majority? Give us a call. Have your say. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking more about President Trump at NATO and that defence spending commitment, Daddy and all that. We're also going to be talking about how actually when we talk about stopping the boats and the Channel migrant crisis, Sunsplash today pointing out security sources have warned that Russia and other hostile nations are pushing migrants to the UK to overwhelm our border defences and to sow division. Well, they're doing rather well at it, aren't they? What are we going to do about it? Well, very, very little. The latest insane decision from an asylum tribunal. An asylum seeker from Tajikistan has been allowed to stay in the UK because he would have had to shave his beard off if he was deported. He won his appeal. I kid you not, people. We are living in mad, mad times. The people who are running these tribunals, I mean, I mean, taking them out and shooting them isn't good enough for them, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, these guys are basically, these people are basically traitors to our nation. I really, really do think that. Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts on all of those big stories. 0344 499 1000. Don't forget, you can go to, I would say, watch us on YouTube.talk, but you can also look at my YouTube page if you don't want to miss anything. You can hit subscribe. It's called, cunningly, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Right now, let's go to the Philip Ingram Show, former senior military intelligence officer, as I say, joining us today. Before we get to all of that, breaking news: Iran's supreme leader, which is, by the way, my new job title in my next contract. I want to be called Supreme Leader.
Supreme Leader.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Yes, ma'am.
Your friend and mine. Well, it was Empress. I think he's Supreme Leader.
Supreme Leader's better.
I think Supreme Leader's got a nicer ring to it.
It has, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. You've got an MBE, haven't you? You like a goal.
And it's gender neutral. You like gender neutral.
Always very important. I'm a non-binary supreme. No. Anyway, Khamenei, our good friend, he's just released a message on his X account. I love that these mad mullahs use technology.
Yes,
it always,
of course.
It's utterly bizarre. They want to take their own people and the world back to the Stone Ages, but they use technology. He says, I offer my congratulations on the victory over Israel. Was it really? He's also said that Iran has approved a bill to suspend cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Let's face it, they were pretending to cooperate before.
Exactly.
They were hiding their enriched uranium. They've hidden it even before those airstrikes by those B-2 bombers. So, yeah, plus ça change. But Philip Ingram, let's talk first of all about welfare, and then we'll come on to defence, because they are tied in. We ain't got any money. We haven't got money for defence, and we haven't got any money for welfare. There needs to be reform. So we're going to have a reform of welfare, or are we not? Because Keir Starmer's apparently going to water down his welfare reforms because he's got a massive rebellion from Labour MPs. Are the Labour MPs right, or is he right, or are they both wrong?
Well, no, we need a massive reform of welfare, but the Labour MPs were elected on, effectively supporting people with whatever they want out in society. If they need handouts, they'll give them as many handouts as they want, because that's Labour's basic.
Labour is no longer the party of Labour; it's the party of Labour-outs.
The big thing in this is, with all the rebels, you mentioned committee chairs that are in there. You have junior ministers or parliamentary private secretaries vote against the government. I don't know whether he's going to whip this, but if they try and whip this vote and people vote against it, the MPs tend to lose their vote, lose their whip. And then those that are in positions of responsibility tend to have to resign from that. That is a massive, massive issue for Keir Starmer when it comes to trying to keep the machinery of government going without there being some form of big reform. He's in real trouble here.
Yeah, he really is, and it is extraordinary that he's in such trouble so early in his administration. Sometimes, though, I do think it feels like he's been in power for a very long time. It feels like we've had a very busy last year. And Keir Starmer has done quite well on the world stage in terms of... A lot of it is smoke and mirrors, whether it's what's happening at NATO or trade deals with Donald Trump. But he's done largely not as badly as I thought he would do. Yeah. I'll say that much at least. But it's always very easy. And Tony Blair did this as well. And David Cameron, everyone, they all love prancing around on the world stage because, you're very busy and important, and there's lots of flags and ministerial cars, and you're just so terribly busy and important. Everyone takes you seriously, and you make announcements, things like that. Whereas actually, the nitty-gritty of domestic policy and dealing with the finances and welfare reform and getting people back to work and, energy policy, it's not as sexy. And you don't get much credit for it. But at the end of the day, if he wrong decision on winter fuel.
Yep.
It was a wrong decision announced. Crazy to have done that. Had to U-turn.
Yep.
I think welfare reforms don't go far enough, but he's going to water them down. Once he's done that, and we've seen numerous other U-turns on other policies as well, he's basically shown he doesn't believe in anything, the policies don't stand, he's spineless, he's got no authority, he's weak.
Yep.
The message that has gone out to backbenchers is you can basically win any argument you want to win. He's lost his moral authority already.
Yeah, well, and he's got no economic growth. He's empowered the unions, and there it comes back in our winter of discontent that we're going to get in.
And the Employment Rights Bill will give them easier rights. You'll be able to go on strike with just 10% of the workforce agreement.
Exactly. He hasn't smashed the gangs, and we're getting 2 infantry battalions worth of young fighting men, and as we see in the front page of the Sun today, pushed by the Russians into this country.
And how seriously do you take that? You mentioned earlier you wrote a book about, a novel about this.
Extremely seriously, and there was a thread in the novel. I put it as a thread novel because I knew it was happening.
How does that happen?
Well, the Russian politics and Russian organised crime are one, effectively. It's the organised crime gangs that are pushing in, and the Russians will know that by pushing
Putin's a mafia boss,
exactly by pushing as many people across the channel. They're destabilising government. They're causing political capital to be taken and debating it. It's costing us an awful lot of money that can't be spent elsewhere. That in itself creates further arguments and discontent within the country, and it creates discontent between the UK and our European neighbours. Therefore, it's win-win-win-win-win for Vladimir Putin. And so that's why he's doing it.
Yeah, and again, we see, like, the Russian bots, and we see Iran, China, other countries do this as well. But they genuinely do this, and it does sow discord. And there's a lot of evidence, actually, that awful, like, the pushing of trans lobby, the green agenda, the pro-Palestinian guardian, that a lot of this is being pushed. It sows dissent. It undermines national sort of values and security and community cohesion, and this does have an impact, and it is just slowly disintegrating the building blocks of Western civilization, our values and our belief system.
Yeah, this is grey zone warfare. Putin is a past master at finding a little fracture somewhere, putting a knife in it, wiggling it, making it bigger and bigger. But it's not just Putin, it's those that also support. You look at Palestine Action and the reports that are coming out about it being funded by the Iranians. We've known that for a long time. Exactly.
What weren't the Iranians funding?
Well, you find it elsewhere. You find some of the political parties within the British Isles, I'll put it that geographically, will be being funded by less than cooperative countries in some of their actions, so that they can continue to cause disruption on these issues.
Yeah, I mean, again, it all ties in. It's fascinating. You know what's been happening in terms of defence, welfare, all of this, and it all ties in. And as you say, the migrant crisis being fueled. Let's talk about Donald Trump, though. I mean, we've just had Donald Trump. He's Daddy's Mark Rutte. Actually, look, come on, just for a laugh, let's play that clip again of Donald Trump being called Daddy by the Secretary General of NATO.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. They fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get
use strong. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
Now, they've been playing this up. There was a question at the press conference from Sky about this, and they tweeted, White House tweeted when Donald Trump arrived home, Daddy's home. They're having some fun with it. It was an interesting point, though, Divine, that former Defence Secretary Liam Fox about how, and this is an issue in the media generally because of social media as well, and we fall victim to it as well. There's something like this that is funny, and then we focus on that, and it is just like the trivialisation of political coverage.
Good clickbait.
It is good clickbait. However, come on, as well as I do on this show, we talk about the big serious stuff at great length. Sorry, but it is interesting in terms of his role. It was just an analogy, but he talking about these two countries effing around, Israel and Iran. But there is an element where he is the daddy when it comes to military security. He's got the biggest military might in the world by a long, long way. And they showed that with their attack on those nuclear sites, and basically on behalf of the world, on behalf of Israel, on Iran. But also 50% of our military capability in NATO comes from America. But did he win a victory in getting most, not all, European NATO countries to frankly start vaguely pulling their weight?
Yeah, I'm not a Donald Trump fan in any way, shape or form, but what he's managed to do in waking European NATO up and getting them to start to take defence seriously and all the rest of it is fantastic. What he's done with the, as he calls it, the 12-day war between Israel and Iran with the US intervention is masterful.
And he's got the ceasefire.
So he's got a ceasefire. He's achieving some good things, but the way that he is taking over everything, and everyone is sort of hero worshipping him the whole way through. And this is where Daddy is a good joke, but it's also, when you think about it, it sends shivers down your spine and is a bit uncomfortable whenever you
we
hear
had
it.
that text message that Mark Rutte sent, and again they're all having to sort of kowtow. And again, even when Keir Starmer was in the White House and he handed over that invitation from the King, and it's just. They're playing games with him to that extent, but it is, well, if that's what you have to do, I suppose. They're just counting down to when he's out of office. That's what they're doing. They're going to literally go, OK, we've got 4 years of this, and then he's gone.
But then why don't we just get some political backbone? I was going to use a different word, but let's get some political backbone. And if different nations stood up and went, actually, no, we're going to be the daddy as well. We're all equal daddies.
Well, we're not. But we're not, because at the end of the day, we don't have the military capability, and then fundamentally, we still won't, even after the end of this 5% contribution, because again, part of that 5%, 5% is 1.5%. I mean, even the 3% is a bit dodgy, but 1.5% of it isn't on defence projects at all, or getting more soldiers on the ground, or any military capability. It's Heathrow Airport having a third runway. It's border security. But I mean, we're supposed to have border security anyway. This is the thing. Does anyone seriously think we can protect our own borders from an invasion of any sort, or indeed our allies? Yes, the expectation that there will be some sort of incursion into NATO territory by Vladimir Putin in the next 5 years. Well, it seems to be. I mean, people can poo-poo this being said by Zelensky, but it seems to be what most military analysts I speak to say, either on or off the record. But what, we're going to go protect Lithuania's borders, are we? We can't even protect our own. From as you say, two infantry battalions of men arriving
every day,
who don't even, on average, who don't even have weapons.
Yeah, and we're now getting clear reports that they're being sent in by the enemies of the state, the very people that were mentioned by Mark Rutte as the single biggest threat to NATO countries and everything else. But Keir Starmer has a plan. It's smash the gangs, but the gangs are the states. And the state that's doing this is Russia. He's not smashing anything. He's not achieving anything with regard to the security of our borders.
Absolutely. I want to hear from you on all of this. It's fascinating how these are all such different topics, but they all tie in.
They're all linked.
So well.
All linked.
And again, meanwhile, let's spend a load of money on fat jabs, instead of saying to people, lose the weight yourself. I'm sorry, but on the NHS, I really, really object to my money being spent on giving people a jab to lose weight. For a start, you're going to be spending less money on food. You can afford the fat jabs yourselves. OK, the NHS will pay for the first one. No, we'll go that far. I just think this is mad. And in particular, when we look at side effects, and we look at pancreatitis, and it's not things like diarrhea and things like that people are getting, but the latest official report suggesting 10 deaths certainly related to these jabs. Yeah, a load of people are using them, but still a risk. We said they won't be risk-free. I've been right. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you on all the topics. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, but in particular about Keir Starmer watering down these welfare reforms because of this this massive rebellion from Labour backbench MPs. But who's in the right? Any of them? All of them? None of them? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Right now, though, it is competition time. Here at Talk, we are giving you a chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester on July the 19th. We're also going to put you up in a hotel and give you, wait for it, $5 grand spending money. I mean, that's a lot of drinks at a concert, isn't it? Here's everything you need to know and how to enter.
Alright, kid. You have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5 grand spending money, all you got to do is text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Sorted. Right, here's all the legal stuff. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You've got to have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com.
Good luck to you. 11:21 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, then we'll take your calls. Do get in touch. As I say, the number 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I think it's all about the comparatives, isn't it? And when you've got, as I said in the House of Commons today, when you've got shoplifters, robbers, thieves, muggers, drug dealers, and the likes getting lesser sentences to go to jail or no jail sentences, maybe something suspended, you sort of say, well, this comparison is wrong. And if you had a system where sentences were very, very long and this was a normal sentence for a hideous, offensive tweet, well, that's in the normal comparisons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. 11:23 is the time. Let's remind you of that breaking news coming from Iran. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has issued a statement on his X account. So I'm still chuckling. I do just find it funny, these people. Also, I love the fact that people got taken off accounts like X and Twitter for saying things like trans women, because they're not. But not an issue for a murdering, brutal, mad mullah to have it on. No, have your account. That you and Xi Jinping, not a problem. But Khamenei has issued a statement saying, I offer my congratulations on the victory over Israel. He's also stated that Donald Trump the US did not achieve anything in their attacks on Iran. They would say that. They've also approved a bill to suspend cooperation with the IEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Authority. But realistically, Philip, I mean, they weren't cooperate anyway. They were hiding there. I mean, again, why have you've got 60% enriched uranium, which you only need for military purposes, but you claim you're not trying to build it for military purposes. So, by definition, come on.
And why have your labs, 100 metres underground in the side of a mountain? Because that's the cheapest way to have them instead of on the surface. Where
where of course the inspections can happen. I mean, come on. I mean, I always wonder, do they think anyone believes them, or is it just that everyone just plays along with the madness?
Everyone's along with the madness.
What can you do? What can you do? Right, well, let's get back to the madness going on back here. Keir Starmer set to water down his welfare reforms. They didn't go far enough, in my view. Some of them, I mean, again, I don't want welfare benefits taken away from people who need them, and I'm sure there would be mistakes in this, but I also want an awful lot of people who don't need them not to get them to get back to work. But he's just trying to head off a major rebellion by almost 130 Labour MPs. Some have been calling for regime change in number 10. What, could he lose another chief of staff? He's not even been in office a year. Let's get back to some of your messages. Come in after says, dangerous to tweak. The bill is flawed. It can't be rushed. It's too important to fudge. And Guy says, Starmer has more twists than a slinky factory. What a great line. I'll be stealing that for a column, Guy. Thank you very much. And Tony says, I want the whole traitorous Labour government out of office. He says, it's shocking what Starmer's ilk have done to this beautiful country. Shame on Starmer. Lucy says, we need to get the PM out. Anyone who sides with him. Starmer is useless, says Drew, as is his entire party. They're now proven liars. And sure, there's finally some Labour MPs are cottoning on to the mood of the country. Well, you say that, but actually, I mean, there are a lot of people going, oh, I don't want my taxes to go up. Well, if the welfare bill's going to go up, your taxes are going to go up. So, pick a side, people. You can't have everyone who wants benefits going on benefits for the rest of their lives and not working, but also see your taxes go down. So that's the reality. Let's go to the phone line. 0344 499 1000. Tony is on the line. He's in Hull. Hello, Tony. What do you want to say?
Yeah, good morning, Julia. Thanks for your time. I just want to speak in defence. I appreciate your tact on the welfare reforms. I totally 100% agree with you that they need reform.
Yeah.
Too many shilly-shallies going on, too much money being wasted. But I've worked all my life. Last September, I had major heart problems. Had to have a defib fitted, all the usual palaver. I'm still off work because I've got problems. I'm literally on my way to the hospital as we speak.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the welfare reforms. I'm glad that there's rebels in the place. Starmer, his management way of doing things is just ridiculous. The Office of Budget Responsibility has not put out any data on this until the autumn.
Yeah.
I heard yesterday that the support money that they said that's going to help people back into work will be available up to the end of the decade. I mean, what's all that about?
Well, I mean, again, you're not going to get everyone back to work on the first day, especially with rising unemployment. But here's the thing: you've worked your life in. You need the support financially from the state, from the taxpayers right now, which you're due and you've got every moral and legal entitlement to. But we're talking about taking benefits away from people who the state thinks don't need them.
No, and like I said, I totally agree with you.
So what's wrong with this welfare bill then?
What's wrong with the welfare bill? It's ill thought out. Instead of the government using like the Home Office, the DWP properly to look into people, and instead of doing over the phone telephone assessments.
Well, assessments need to be in person, and they need to be with a medical professional. I've always thought that. Yeah.
But I personally, I don't know about anybody else, I can only speak personally, I had to jump through hoops, I had to provide medical, letters from my doctors.
I would expect that. Well, I mean, why shouldn't we expect that?
So where's the fault then if people are getting that evidence to the DWP claiming and they're still getting through the
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? There's a difference between, again, someone that might not be able to do. Okay, you can't carry on as a builder or a scaffolder, do it, with certain disabilities, but you can do other work. It's like someone being off work for 3 years for stress for being a teacher. Well, maybe you can't go back to being a teacher. You're gonna have to get another job. I mean, but the biggest rising claims for years it was backache because you couldn't actually measure that. Then it became stress. Now it's anxiety and depression, and we're talking about something like huge a fraction of young people who are leaving school, leaving college, never working, claiming they've got anxiety and stress and doing it. There's no reason to think that our young people are in any worse state than the young people of most of the countries, and yet we're putting them on the scrap heap of life straight away. They're not incapable of working.
But as I said, I do believe it's the government's. It's on the government. The onus is on the government. Yeah. To put this right, not by just a blanket lazy way of doing things, by just cutting it in the way that they've done and just rejigging the assessment points.
But isn't that why is that lazy? Surely that should be valid. That's saying, look, you need to you need to be clearly in need to get this benefit. I don't. There will be people. There'll be people who fall through the net. There always are. We need to make sure there's a good and quick appeals process. We need to have the assessments in person by medical professionals who understand that someone could be fine that day, but completely incapacitated the next day, depending on what their issue is, and therefore, let's face it, unable to get a job or keep a job. We understand that, but there's lots of things that need to be fixed. But surely we should be asking for evidence and proof that people can't work. I don't think that's unreasonable.
No, not at all. But as I say, if the government's giving you the opportunity to put that through for your assessment, and you're getting all the right paperwork from wherever, say your doctors or the hospital, is it not their problem that they're giving out, as you say yourself, anxiety and depression certificates, so they may be able to claim PIP? Yeah. Now, for me, PIP is mobility. I can't walk 50 metres without getting out of breath. I don't see how.
Oh, Tony, you've disappeared. Oh, we've lost his line. Okay, so you said you can't walk 50 metres without getting out of breath.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, why are you getting mobility for 20-year-olds with a BMW?
Yeah, and that's the key. There's the rub. A really good call. Listen, I hope the hospital trip goes well. We wish you the best in your recovery, Tony. Appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get another quick call in. Steve is in Luton. Steve, you want to talk about the welfare reform as well. Whose side are you on, if anyone's?
If I had my way, I'd scrap the welfare state. If you don't work, you die. But that ain't going to happen.
Are you kidding me? That seems a moral position.
Well, listen. If I was in power, right, and I told you what I just said, if I scrap welfare state, right, and you'd be happy. I'm sure you think you pay too much tax, which we all do think we do, and sometimes we do. I drop your income tax to 5% tomorrow. Now, how do you think about that?
Well, you wouldn't be able to do because there's other things we need. No, I want a welfare state that helps people in need.
No, because people don't take responsibility.
Oh, so what about someone who's worked all their life, okay, and then they have a car accident and they're incapacitated, they need a carer for the rest of their life? Well, should they just take responsibility? They shouldn't have had a car accident. Sodom.
Well, if you're more aware of the road, if you take more responsibility of your accident.
Oh, okay. So what if someone, their child has leukemia and they have to be at home caring for their child because their child has got leukemia? Oh, well, they should have been more responsible, shouldn't they, Steve?
Yes, but it'd be a smaller pot. Obviously,
yes, I want a smaller pot. I want welfare to be something for people who are in need.
Yes, but the welfare needs to be a smaller amount of spending. Why are you going to work every day and you've got people sitting around? Not all of them. There are good people that are looking for jobs and they're having a moment. They've got to find employment. I get that. I'm not stupid. There will be a smaller pot We're paying £200 billion a year plus more a year for you to pay taxes for people, hard-working people that are on the borderline. They're going to work, they're sweating the anyway off.
And I don't want people to swing in the lead, but I also, as a part of a civilised society, want to be making sure we're paying for the people who need it. Steve, I don't think even he believes you. You gave him every example. He'd go, yeah, for them. Well, that's how we ended up with the welfare state. We're going to have to go to a quick break now. Up next, let's talk to someone who actually knows about these welfare reform policies in more detail, what they're going to cost, what they're going to say. Paul Johnson is the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. He's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:34 is the time to let you know that the Prime Minister is back in the country. Nice of you to pop in, Prime Minister. Thanks ever so for leaving the world stage and coming back and running the country. You're Prime Minister of. But he's making a statement right now on the NATO summit, and he's saying also about Iran and Israel, urging both countries to honour the ceasefire they've agreed with. I believe they have been in the last 24 hours. Philip Ingram is still with me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. I want to get your thoughts on what our next guest has to say, because when we talk about welfare reform and the politics of that, and the Prime Minister trying to head off a major rebellion by almost 130 Labour MPs, including committee chairs, but the actual, well, I suppose the specifics of the policy, I suppose we should know a bit more about, shouldn't we? So let's talk to Paul Johnson. He's the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies and joins us now. Good morning to you, Paul.
Morning.
Let's, Janet and John, let's go all the way back. How much are we spending on the whole of the welfare state, sort of roughly per year, and how much of that is things like the disability, incapacity, sickness benefits, which this bill tries to tackle?
Well, it depends how you define the welfare state, of course, but if you're looking at money for people of working age,
not pensions. Okay, yeah.
So not pensions. Let's talk about those separately. But if you're talking about benefits paid to people of working age, we spend just over 100 billion a year, which is quite a lot of money on that. And actually, these benefits for people with health problems or disabilities is a good half of that. So we're looking at a number which has increased really dramatically over the last decade, from less than 40 billion a year pre-COVID, heading towards 65 or even 70 billion a year by the end of this decade. So about half, astonishingly, of the amount that we spend on working age welfare goes in one way or another to people with who claim sickness or disability benefits.
And it's not just that the actual physical amount of money people are getting is going up. Obviously, benefits have had to go up in line with some inflation, but we're talking about a huge number more people able to claim those benefits. Now, the issue that Keir Starmer and Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, say they're trying to tackle is to cut our spending on benefits for people who don't need those benefits. That's the idea. So taking in terms of the point system that which you have to score to be eligible for these benefits. Now, they're not actually going to save any money in terms of the real terms. It's going to carry on going up. It's just going to go up by less, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I should say all of the numbers I quoted and ones I'm going to quote are once you adjust for inflation. So the numbers are going up even after you take account of inflation. But yes, the numbers are going up, and they're going up really very fast. And so the government talks about these reforms saving 5 billion a year by the end of the decade, which they do relative to where we would be without any reforms. Nevertheless, we'll be spending an awful lot more than we are today. So just to give you a sense, back in 2020, we were spending about 36 billion on these benefits. Today, we're spending over 50 billion, and the expectation is that without reform, we'd be spending something like 66 billion. So that is a huge increase. If we did nothing, then over the decade, we will be spending an entire 1% of national income more on sickness-related benefits for people of working age than we were.
Yes, and what a lot of us can't work out is, and yes, I know we've got delays in getting treatment on the NHS. I know we had COVID and we had lockdown and all of that, but you know what? So pretty much every other country had similar experiences in Western Europe, and they have not seen an explosion in the number of people seeking to get on sickness or disability benefits. Now, how much of this is people being able to claim for things that they previously haven't claimed? We saw that rise in the number of people claiming for backache over many, many years, and then it became stress, mental health problems, became anxiety. The largest component of people adding on to these roles of claimants tends to change over the years, but other countries haven't seen these sorts of changes either in the types of claimants or indeed in the amount of money. So what's different that's happened here?
Good question. I don't think we really know the answer.
It's part of the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
It's worth saying this has happened across all age groups, with particularly big proportionate increases among young people, which are almost entirely driven by various forms of mental health problems, including anxiety and depression and so on, but also increases among older people that were more likely physical issues, and a lot of that, as you say, is backache or musculoskeletal in the terminology. The biggest numbers on these benefits are actually in the poorest areas of the country, so in a lot of those former industrial areas where historically there have been more of those claims. You're right that this is an increase happening in this country, which has not happened in other countries. One possible reason is that actually, relative to a lot of those other countries, our unemployment benefit system is really pretty mean, and if you can get onto these sickness benefits, then that makes a big difference to your the potential for you to be able to live a decent life.
Our guest at 12 o'clock, actually, about another topic is Fraser Nelson, who did a really interesting documentary about people being trapped in this system and being pushed in the system. Once you're on it, no one assesses you for another 3 years, and and it's a Zoom call. People are not being properly assessed. In terms of the government apparently facing this rebellion, talking about watering down these reforms. I mean, if they water down the reforms any more than they're going, these are hardly groundbreaking, game-changing reforms as it is, given that they're not actually going to cut the welfare bill. It's just going to be slightly less than it will otherwise be. Can they water them down anymore?
Well, I mean, there's lots of issues there. I mean, there's a lot of reforms going on here. I mean, I think we've mostly been talking about the personal independence payment benefits. These are the benefits that you get whether you're in work or not. Actually,
although only 1 in 8 people claiming them are in work.
Indeed, most of the people on those benefits are out of work, and they're being made more difficult to claim. And then the additional amount you get if you're on universal credit, this is the means tested benefit, that's being halved. But all of these things are being brought in gradually. So it's not the case that if you're on one of these benefits, you suddenly tomorrow are going to get a big cut in your benefit. If you're on the universal credit bit, that will be you'll keep that whilst you're on universal credit. It'll only be new claimants who get the halving in their benefits, and only on personal independence payment, new claimants and people who get reassessed. Now, reassessments happen very infrequently at the moment, and as you say, all of this nowadays is online. This is a change that was introduced during COVID and has not stopped. They've carried on with that, and we're getting twice as many people each day claiming as was the case COVID. So there's all sorts of things you can do to the way that this works. But what else can you do to save money? I mean, what's happening with personal independent payment is that it's for those who are not at the most highest level of disability who are seeing cuts. So you could reduce the scale of those cuts, or you could but if you want anything like that scale, you'd think it's only those at the not at the highest level you want to cut from. So you immediately reduce your savings quite significantly. The government's also, of course, promising extra money to help people into work and all of those sorts of things. And I think rather, probably not politically the best way of doing it was say, well, we'll start doing that after we've started the cut. So
yes, you kind of need it the other way around.
Change the direction.
I mean, this is the issue, isn't it? It's not just the cost to the economy of people going out to work, paying taxes, and their money not going to anything that's actually producing anything, or not buying goods, not anything else, but going towards paying people to not work, some of whom realistically could work. It's very unlikely that none of these people couldn't work. But also it's the fact that those people are not producing themselves and not paying tax themselves. So there's a double whammy cost of this. But is it likely they will get a large number of these people back into work, given that the majority of people who go on to PIP, it's an in-work benefit, are in work. The majority of people claiming PIP are not in work. So only 1 in 8 are. So it does look like kind of has the opposite impact in terms of giving people more independence and ability to work. But given that we've seen just gentle ticks up in unemployment, is it actually likely that, and we're not seeing the 2.5% growth we were all promised in the manifesto, is it likely that a lot of these jobs will be found?
Well, it's possible that this will have an effect at helping people into work. And another of the changes, there are lots and lots of changes in this bill, another of the changes that's being introduced is that the assessment for universal credit will be changed such that it effectively becomes the same as the assessment for personal independence payment, and you won't automatically lose the addition when you move into work. So there's something very problematic about the current system is if you're on universal credit, you've got the health-related addition. Now, that health-related addition you get because you can't work. So if you do work, you lose it. And that does have or could have a perverse incentive. So you could have positive effects of these changes on numbers in work, but I wouldn't expect it to be enormous. I mean, these are always difficult norms, difficult behaviours to change. But again, you look into the long run, and if we keep the current system, then it's pretty clear this will encourage more people than otherwise would be the case to remain out of work. So you do need to change this. I'm pretty clear about that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many people, whether unemployed or claiming these benefits, are actually already in work, but they're working in the black market.
And of course, the other thing we know is if you've got things like anxiety or so on, some of these mental health problems, being in work is the best thing that you can do.
Work is good for you.
Not being at work is rather bad for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Paul Johnson, very much appreciate you joining us, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Great to get some just facts on this, non-political, non-partisan. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that, what do you make of what he had to say?
Well, talking common sense, I think there's the message that comes out of this is there's an awful lot more that the government can do to try and deal with it. And one of the things I was thinking of is changing when it's coming to medical certifications for people, taking away from local GPs. Yeah. You have someone has got a chronic condition and you've got a consultant grade individual has signed a piece of paper, that's fine. But if you're not under a consultant grade, if it's something else, you then have to go through a formal patient health assessment before you can get that.
But I do think it should be someone medical, but I think it does put a lot of pressure on GPs.
Yes, and local GPs who are in the local community.
That's that long-term relationship that people have.
Yeah, but take that pressure away from GPs so that people can be independently
But far too many doctors go, yep, signed off.
Yeah,
there
exactly.
you go. Yep, here you go. Here's your piece of paper. Just get out of. I've got another 10 people waiting to see me.
Exactly.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Get in touch. It's not just the politics of it. I mean, it's about real people. I want to make sure that the people who need it get it. The people who don't need it don't get it. But also, you might lose your benefit if you get a job. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course you should. But the point is that people choose on lots of those cases, whether it's unemployment benefit or it's not to get the job. Mm-hmm. We don't want to make a situation where it makes it hard for them to make those choices. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be paying taxes for you if you could be working, because you should morally. I'm sorry, there's no shame in getting benefits if you need the money. Mm-hmm. That should be a source of pride for all of us that we are doing that for people in society. If you can and you don't work, that should be a source of shame. You should be ashamed of yourself, and we should shame you. I really think we need to bring that back in our society. Well, the duty of care to yourself and to your society.
And we can look at other models across the continent. Having lived in Germany, the Germans would allow you a set period of time where you weren't working. They would then help you go for various job interviews. If you didn't take any of those jobs, they would then give you a job. If you did get the job, you didn't get benefits.
Yeah, can I just say, though, not working so well with the million arrivals in 2015, barely any of whom were working. Just saying. Amazing, again, because you think all those engineering jobs. 11:47 is
the brain
time.
surgeons.
Brain surgeons, yeah, that's right. That's all the right engineers. I'm never going to get tired of that, guys. Ben Habib's going to be talking to us about the migrant crisis being fuelled by Putin's Russia and other hostile nations. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Yeah, no, I think...
What an absolute mess for this Labour government. The fact that less than a year on, the MRP poll, which is sort of the gold standard poll that we use to do seat-by-seat projections, shows that they're not just going to have that majority cut, but cut significantly.
Yeah.
And they'll be pushed into second, and Reform are the ones who have the most seats. If you look at the vote share in that MRP poll, Reform is slightly ahead of Labour in terms of vote share, but in seat projection, they're miles ahead. And that is because they are appealing to all areas of the country. They're taking votes not just from the Tories, but also Labour red wall seats as well. And so that should really worry Keir Starmer.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go to our next guest now. Ben Habib is the former deputy leader of Reform UK, has his other political machinations going now. Ben Habib, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good morning.
Lovely to talk to you. Latest front page in The Sun today, and I have a whole string of front pages about the migrant crisis, and it never ceases to amaze me how utterly mad our world is. But the latest revelation, not just with these migrant workers turning up and 3 minutes later they got a job illegally in the black market working as delivery drivers, and everyone's going, oh, well, let's just pretend it's not happening until The Sun put it on the front page when they'll now pretend to deal with it. But now we've learned that actually security services reckon that the crisis of migrants arriving is being fuelled by Putin's Russia and other hostile states, and it's a secret bid to destabilise the UK. They're making it easy for these migrant gangs to smuggle people across nations. They're providing them with help and support, even sometimes supplying the boats, and it's all for nefarious aims. What do you make of that?
Well, I absolutely believe that to be the case, and I think we've got direct evidence of it without having to infer that it's happening. We saw Belarus fly in migrants to Belarus from Syria and other places, and then march them up to the Polish border and try and force the Poles to take them. You might recall that was a couple of years ago, I think.
And Poland won't take migrants from Belarus now. They've shut the door to them.
Absolutely. They've done something remarkable. They've enforced their borders. They actually they put a fence up and they put their army behind the fence, what you might call traditional border patrolling. And they stopped that.
We should try that.
We should try it. It's a novel idea. It's something our forefathers had established, but we've forgotten. And you know, we have got foreign actors involved, no doubt. I'm sure a lot of it is now taking place of its own volition, because they've recognized that we are an incredibly weak force in the West. You know, we may be prepared to go thousands of miles and bomb people from a great height thousands of miles away, but we're not prepared to protect our own and enforce our own borders. It's a peculiar paradox in which we live.
It really is. And the thing I've always found so strange is why we think that we can actually, protect any other country's borders under the NATO umbrella. Well, we can't protect our own from people who aren't even armed with guns. They're just here with a mobile phone and no documentation. And as Philip Ingram, who's a former senior military intelligence officer who's in the studio with me, pointed out, 2 infantry battalions, I always get the wrong terminology, arriving on average every day. And fighting age men, and we're putting them up, giving them accommodation. They're getting jobs on the black market. We're seeing massive issues with violence and sexual harassment and sex assaults on our streets. Young men from very, very, very different alien cultures where they simply do not accept our values, and that women, for instance, are first-class citizens along with men and not third-class. And this is a massive issue. Now, do you think that we are seeing a sea change this? Do you think that there is a waking up? Because so many of my callers this week have been saying people have had enough. They're done. This is now on the front pages of the papers on a daily basis. There's no longer taboo about talking about this, whether it's legal migration and Pakistani rape gangs, or whether it's illegal migration, the cost, the impact. That there is a wake-up call now.
I hope there is a wake-up call. We are doing great damage to ourselves, not just economically, but culturally and also from a security perspective. When it was kicking off between Iran and potentially the US for a moment, thankfully, Donald Trump held his nerve when Qatar was attacked. But when it looked like it might kick off and turn into a really full-blown regional war, for a moment there, one of the thoughts I had was, well, how many people are in the United Kingdom who've entered illegally from Iran or have sympathies with Iran, who will now stand up and challenge us domestically, internally, where we would be so vulnerable? And these are the kinds of problems we're storing up for ourselves.
Yeah, and the whole of Europe has done that as well. Look, there's a plot. There's been arrests, there's charges brought. There's going to be a court case, and the allegation is that an Iranian-funded and fueled plot, and that some of those people who've been charged arrived here as asylum seekers on Channel boats.
Absolutely. And the heart of this problem, you and I have discussed this before, the heart of this problem is the notion that every single individual across the globe is equal to a British citizen. Yeah. And that comes through the European Convention of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act, which has embedded it into our law. So we welcome everyone because we regard everyone to have equal rights. And of course, there are some fundamental human rights that should be observed, absolutely. But we've managed to sort of set aside the importance of being British citizens, set aside the importance of protecting our civil society, and empowered all those who are coming to our country illegally. It's gone completely topsy-turvy. Yeah. And of course, the other impact of this, about which you're well aware as well, Julia, is that we've now used the HRA, the Human Rights Act, effectively to provide protection for criminals, and we throw victims under a bus. Yeah. The whole thing's gone mad. And I hope that the British people are waking up. We've got to get rid of that ridiculous act. We've got to get rid of anything, frankly, that came out of the supranational institutions which have so hijacked our democracy, take power back into this government, and first and foremost, relearn, when I say government, I meant parliament, and relearn the absolute fundamental importance of the nation state that is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, with its borders. So they are enforced in the way that Poland did when Belarus challenged them.
Yeah, it is interesting. There are so many people on the left and the Remainer side of the debate who never even seem to recognise the importance of a nation-state sovereignty and border security until they heard of Ukraine. But they don't seem to care about ours. But look, you've got to remember, we've got a government in power who thinks that, European Union citizens should have a vote in our country. I mean, it is just extraordinary. They just don't even accept this. Do you have any hope that this is going to be dealt with? Because again, we celebrated the 9th anniversary of that vote for our freedom from the EU earlier this week. A lot of people say, "Oh, what have the benefits been?" Well, I know what the benefits been. It's our national sovereignty and democratic accountability for our god-awful, useless governments. And the Tories were kicked out for failing to deal with this issue after promising to do so. Labour kind of said they were going to do so. I think they're going to be kicked out for failing to deal with this issue because neither of those parties really get it. I know you've left Reform, you've had calling out with Nigel Farage, but the reality is, looking at the polls, he very well much could be the next Prime Minister of this country in 2029, unless there's a very big event that changes our politics. Do you have any faith that if he did become Prime Minister, he would deal with these issues?
Well, Nigel Farage is a slightly enigmatic individual when it comes to standing his ground. So he is on the record saying peculiar things like he's not worried about the rate of demographic change in the country, that he wouldn't be in favor of deporting all illegal migrants, and a few other things along those lines, which absolutely get my antenna up.
I think when he's talking about that, he was
concerns.
talking about people who've come here and overstayed visas, and a lot of people are remarkably relaxed about that. I don't know why, but they are.
You have to deport all people in the country who are here illegally. If we want to get a grip of the fundamental mass migration, both legal and illegal, that we're facing, get a grip of the problems economically, culturally, constitutionally, we have to take very firm lines now, because gone is the opportunity for marginal adjustments that would have put the organism right. We've got to make dramatic changes, and one of them is the deportation of every single individual in this country who is here illegally.
Yeah. But I'd like to start with, as Donald Trump was planning to do, start with the people who are committing crimes or the illegal arrivals over above people who are now working. But again, they can't be working in the system because they're not here legally, so they're not paying tax, but they're taking money out.
Which is even worse, isn't it? They're here taking jobs away from British citizens, undermining wages, not paying their taxes, no doubt claiming benefits, using our NHS, getting free housing. The whole thing is a disaster. And I heard you talking about, we were promised 2.5% GDP growth. Well, we need at least 2.5% GDP growth just to make up for the number of people who are coming into the country.
Very good point. Ben Habib, we'll have to leave it there. Time against former Deputy Leader at Reform UK, Ben Habib. Really, 10 seconds from Philip Ingram.
I don't think the government realises just how big this migrant crisis is, and that's going to come and
how
bite them quickly.
People take it.
Yep.
And again, it's an economic crisis, it's a cultural crisis, it's a social crisis, it's a military, it's a defence crisis, it's across the board, isn't it? Well, they'll have to wake up at some point. Anyway, we're going to talk about that with the chances of Nigel Farage being the next Prime Minister. That's up next. This is Talk.
Funny that people keep calling.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past 12 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening to DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, great to have your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking a little bit about reform. Yeah, Ben Habib, we just had him on, his old party, because YouGov's first MRP poll, one of those complicated polls they do lots of calculations on, since the general election last year, suggests that Nigel Farage's Reform UK party could win the most seats at the next general election, or they might still fall short of a majority. But it's just that combined support for Conservatives and Labour has collapsed to less than half of the national vote. If all else changes, we're looking at Prime Minister Farage. Well, we'll be discussing this up next with Fraser Nelson, who's hosting a documentary on Channel 4 tonight, asking the simple question, will Nigel Farage be Prime Minister? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do get in touch. Plus, we're talking more about NATO and President Trump, aka Daddy, according to NATO's Secretary General, and whether or not NATO was a success. And we're going to be talking about, well, the cash cow that is motorists. Last year, motorists were fined almost £1 million for illegally stopping in just 36 yellow box junctions across England. It's after councils are given new powers to extend the war on motorists. But hey, don't we all approve of fines on people who park in, or get stuck in those yellow boxes? Isn't that one of the ones we actually approve of? We'll talk to Howard Cox about that. Do stay tuned. Plenty more to come. I still want to hear your thoughts on the Prime Minister watering down his welfare reforms. That's what we're told he's going to have to do as he faces a rebellion from up to 130 Labour MPs. And no, they're not all the usual suspects. They include committee chairs and the like. Some are calling for regime change at number 10. Is that the answer? Do you approve, disapprove of the welfare reforms? Do they go too far? Do they go, well, not far enough? Maybe they're the Goldilocks of welfare reforms and you just love them. Give us your reaction, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can text us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost one standard network rate message. Still joining me in the studio, I'm delighted to say, mainly because we locked the door, it's Philip Ingram. He's former senior military intelligence officer, but we've shuffled him out of his usual seat. Welcome in another guest, Times columnist, former Spectator editor, Fraser Nelson joins us. A very good afternoon to you.
Great to be here.
Always glad to hear from you. You say you've got a new documentary because you did. We've just been talking about welfare reform, and you did a fantastic, really interesting, very nuanced documentary about the problems we've got with welfare, people being trapped in welfare. And I do want to get a little bit of your thoughts on that and where we are on that, because it's such a big topic today. But first up, though, let's talk about the new documentary you've got, which is very, very, very simply asking the question: will Nigel Farage be the next Prime Minister? Let's have a little look at the trailer.
It could be a moment of madness.
There's a new future PM doll, and there it is. It's sold out.
Or it may be a signal that the top job in government is actually within his reach. My name is Fraser Nelson. I'm a political columnist for The Times.
Also, he's doing a documentary on reform.
I want to look beyond the headlines and ask the people who might put him in high office why they'd support him.
Reform being this voice that, people can speak freely is attractive to young people.
Can a man who triggers such reactions really lead and unite the country?
The guy's a clown, he's a charlatan, he's a cheat.
And you've got what it takes?
I do so.
And how could he actually pull it off?
It's nuts. It's all got to stop.
Well, that's a little taste of the documentary. Fraser Nelson. First of all, was this quite a good fun documentary to make? Because I have to say, one thing Nigel Farage isn't is boring.
It was certainly a circus. Even tracking him down was quite difficult. So I went up to Hamilton in the by-election, where he's playing cat and mouse with the protesters. So for example, we were told, OK, Nigel will meet you outside this doner kebab shop in the car park. So we went there, and all the rest of the crews were there. And then the protesters got word he was going to be there. So then all the socialist workers or whatever come after. And then it turns out that was a massive decoy. He actually was in a brick factory somewhere else.
Right.
So even if you want to track him down, you need to go through this kind of choreography of the great Farage circus. But then that he was the dominant factor in that by-election. There were so many parties there, but he basically made it about reform.
Yeah.
And so that was a simple... Previously, the idea of reform doing well in Scotland would be unthinkable. But now Farage was basically making the conversation for him or against him. That was the question.
Well, indeed, look, we had a poll earlier this week suggesting that the party could easily win a majority of the next election. The MRP poll for YouGov, again, these are really detailed polls, over 11,000 people. They do all the extrapolation. They don't just say a flat swing of this amount would mean these constituencies would turn, turquoise rather than red or blue. They actually extrapolate, go into the numbers of the people, and they're saying that it is very, very likely that Nigel Farage's Reform Party could be the largest party at the next election. A lot of people talking about the prospect of a Tory coalition. I mean, I can't see the Lib Dems or Labour going into coalition with Reform, so who else would it be? How likely do you think, if you ask who will be the next Prime Minister in, let's say, the elections 2029, although it may be sooner at the rate this government is going, who do you think the next Prime Minister will be?
Well, if you go down to the bookies right now and want to place a bet, you'll find that Nigel Farage is the bookmaker's favourite to succeed Keir Starmer. Now, it's 4 years out, it's difficult to make any kind of prediction.
I mean, bearing in mind 4 years before last year's general election, no one was saying that Keir Starmer would be the next Prime
Of course. So the wheel of British politics spins quite fast at the moment. So whatever seems to be the case 1 month tends not to be the case in 4 and 5 months' time. Yeah. But what I do in the film is try to look at the roots behind the roots. It's not so much about Farage, but why people are supporting him. Now, they are exasperated, to put it mildly, with the two main parties. They see in their communities, in their country, things are bad and they're getting worse. Now, a lot of them had thought that a change of government might help. But we did this focus group in Solihull, which isn't exactly classic Reform territory. This is in the Midlands, this is sort of swing voters. And we had 10 people who hadn't quite decided how they were going to vote.
The Solihull would have been solid Labour territory.
Once upon a time,
yeah.
Absolutely. But we know, for example, that the seaside towns, that Blackpool almost certainly go Reform. But there's more to it than just simply despair. There is hope, there's aspiration, but most of all, exasperation. Now, and so the voters were saying, well, we weren't quite sure what Keir Starmer stood for, but we didn't think it was going to be taking away your window of fuel payments, taking away your benefits. Because right now, if you were to say, well, a year of Labour, what's he done? Most people could only point to those two things.
Yeah.
And they think, well, this is not the solution. This is not an alternative agenda. But the thing to remember is that we had a lot of abstainers in the last election. That wasn't apathy, it was anger. So that's one of the things we picked up. One of the biggest support sources of Reform support are people who didn't vote last time, who are going to vote this time.
But of course, the trouble with being in office is you have an opportunity to disappoint the voters. Very easy. I mean, it's with the Lib Dems. They went into coalition with the Tories, and they're the ones who were punished in 2015. Tories got a nice big majority for David Cameron, but it was the Lib Dems that were punished. If you go into whether it's majority government or coalition government as a party that's never been in office, well, certainly not for very long time, you then risk doing things that people don't like. Because right now, one of the things about, one of the major criticisms I'm hearing from people who've been long-time Reform UK supporters and Nigel Farage supporters generally, all his various party incarnations, is that he's trying to be all things to all men and gone from having a very sort of quite a free market economic approach to, full-on lefty approach in terms of lots of policies, and actually that is not going to appeal to an awful lot of staunch Reform voters.
But it depends what basis you're looking at this. Now, one of the fascinating things I found out was that you could say to them, as we did, look at Farage's promises, they don't add up. He's promising massive tax cuts, he's promising more welfare.
But neither do Labour's and the Tories.
Well, exactly. I mean, Labour's got the massive black hole, they call it a deficit, the Tories had one too. But voters, they think, well, nobody's sums really add up. But it's not as if they think Nigel Farage is going to fix everything. They think that he might smash a status quo which they think is failing them in their communities. So the idea of a demolition is quite attractive.
That in itself. Is that similar to what happened in America with Donald Trump?
Very
you didn't
similar.
have to like him, you didn't have to agree with even all of his policies, although his policies always polled better than Trump's himself. But actually, it's just someone who would just shake it all up.
You don't have to like him, you don't have to agree with him, you have to see that he's a necessary corrective to a failed consensus. That's the idea.
That's very interesting. Now, the press release from Channel 4, it's on 8 o'clock tonight, there's this documentary, it's part of the Dispatches series, is a quote from Nigel Farage himself, which I think is such an interesting quote. Our biggest enemy between now and next year and those elections will be ourselves. Now, a lot of times he's been accused of being part of the problem, although also the solution, a bump in the polls, as soon as he said, right, I'm going to stand for the general election. We're aiming to be the biggest party in 2029. So many people at Westminster were laughing at him. I wasn't laughing. I was like, uh-oh, guys, you don't know what's about to hit you. But so much of Reform's appeal, we're told, is about Nigel Farage. If Nigel Farage wasn't here tomorrow, or just decided, I'm done with politics, I'm out, would Reform UK just collapse into nothing?
Well, this is one of the fascinating findings we did in the poll that we commissioned. We asked this question. Now, this time last year, you might think, well, before Farage came along, Reform was nothing, so if he decides to quit, it will just collapse like a souffle, right? It's basically the Nigel Farage party masquerading as Reform.
Yeah.
But both the focus group and the opinion poll show that not to be the case. Reform as a brand is now getting serious cut through. People like the idea of a radical alternative based on restructuring the status quo. Now, the opinion poll we did showed that support for Reform would go down about 3 or 4 percentage points, but not that much. It would still be formidable. Still,
I mean, Keir Starmer makes a speech and it goes down by that much.
Exactly. So this is now some more significance than simply Nigel Farage. This is the belief in there being a party of outsiders whose basic USP, whose selling point is that we haven't done this before. We're not the usual suspects.
Yeah.
Now, people like that idea. Now, some people we spoke to in the focus group say they'd be more likely to vote for Reform if it wasn't for Farage, because he is a bit of Marmite.
Yeah.
He brings with him a certain sort of divisive kind of politics. Now, that will work for some people, not for others. So there some of the voters thought, well, I like the idea about Reform, but I don't quite like this kind of, some of the language he uses about culture, sometimes Muslim issues, give some of them pause.
Yeah, except we've had people leaving Reform saying that he's not strong enough on these issues. But it's interesting, I think there's some of the polling you did and looked at about in terms of people, how they view him, whether the belief that he's a racist. But he's not saying anything any different to Keir Starmer now.
Well, no, there's nothing Nigel Farage has ever said or done that would merit the label racist.
No, I know.
But still, interestingly...
I've been drunk with him on many occasions. You'd think something might have slipped out, but never has.
I know.
Because he's not.
I went through a phase of following him down the country to see if he'd say something to a town hall when he thought nobody was listening that might be on the... Absolutely not. He doesn't have a racist bone in his body. But here's the thing. 42% in the poll said he was racist, 42% said he wasn't. But when you look at who was saying he was racist, there were supporters of other parties, Labour, the Greens, the Lib Dems. Now, if you look at Donald Trump, it's exactly the same thing. Racist is the word that a challenger party's opponents will use to try to delegitimise them.
But that word, again, almost doesn't have any meaning anymore. I used to threaten to sue people who called me that on Twitter. Now it's just so common. Everybody's a racist. I mean, everybody's a racist now. So I think it's terrible that we've demeaned the importance of a horrible thing.
But here's the thing, it has a big effect because it tends to drive voters to the other party. So they think, hang on a minute, you're calling him a racist because he wants to control immigration.
But I
want to control immigration, you're calling me a racist. So this word actually serves, it doesn't really serve to contaminate, it doesn't serve to toxify.
That's changed. This is the same with the Democrats. They're in America, their attacks on Donald Trump were 4 years old. The voters had moved on, and they were... How much does this tie in with what's been happening across the rest of Europe? Although we left, Nigel Farage is, instrumental in us leaving and voting for Brexit, 9 years ago this week. But how much does it tie in with that move we've seen? Giorgia Meloni, we've got AfD in Germany, we've got the National Rally in France and in Sweden. Everywhere we've seen the rise of parties often called far right. Now some are.
Some are radical left as well. Podemos in Spain and the Five-Star Movement.
But the outsider parties coming in, particularly on the right, and disrupting.
It's the anti-establishment parties of left and right. Now they're doing very well all over Europe. And look at Donald Trump. He's the fundamental anti-establishment candidate for exactly the same reasons. People feel, for example, economically stagnant after 20 years. In this country, salaries haven't moved. The idea of progress is fading away. But here's the other thing. Demographic change is a major factor in all Western democracies, and the old parties don't like discussing it. And if they won't have important conversations about culture, about what your kids are going to do, about the economic model, then the new parties are willing to have that conversation. Now, if you say, oh, you can't say that because you're racist, then you are driving people to the new party. So we are seeing right now, it's a kind of new consensus, but fundamentally it's pro-democracy. This is democratic process at work.
Absolutely. Well, this, again, I was saying earlier on the show, this is why I voted for Brexit. It's because I wanted democratic accountability. And again, if Tories were elected again and again on a promise of cutting immigration and tackling a lot of these issues, didn't do it, voters kicked them out. Labour made some of those similar promises. They ain't going to do it. And in my views, they will be kicked out. And hopefully at some point people will get that message. How much of this do you think is about the economy? Because, you know, that old line, it's the economy stupid when it comes to, you know, people feeling poorer, not just feeling poorer, they are poorer, energy bills and all that. Again, I think net zero, that's a deal breaker for me, for any party. If people, how much is it about the economy and how poor people feel and worried about their economic future, and how much of it is, say, cultural issues like you know, woke battles, DEI, like, you know, the issues over cultural change in our cities as a result of mass migration from, say, you know, the Indian subcontinent?
Well, I think the economic issue is the base of it. If the economy had been roaring for 20 years, we wouldn't have these problems. But on that base, we've got the idea of a social recession, which is more important. People can see the kind of the social capital of their communities and their towns fading away, and they hate it. But the other point we found in the focus group was that they feel themselves subject to that atmosphere. We had spoke to a 26-year-old guy who was a builder. He was saying, look, me and my mates, we have discussions, we make jokes, but we're living in a world now, if you say something on social media, your life is over, you get called a bigot. Now, every single person in that focus group, we're not talking journalists or people who are actively on social media, they felt that they were in a new world now where you can get judged and cast as a bigot for making some basic observations. They hate that, and they see in Nigel Farage somebody who stands up to this. So because he's a taboo breaker, because he says things that are outrageous and he doesn't care, they think, well, this is what we need to shatter the kind. They feel this is very real in their lives, that right now we're living in an environment where they could lose their job, lose their status, and they see in Reform the only party which will challenge this, not necessarily fix it.
And again, I think a lot of people, they think it's about sort of high-profile people who get castigated, like J.K. Rowling or whatever, but actually it's happening on a grand scale and people are being silenced. I know some of you have done great work over the years trying to sort of shore up people's right to, you know, freedom of speech. Do you think that Nigel Farage, if he became Prime Minister, would be a good Prime Minister? Because one of the questions I've asked him recently is like, do you actually want the job?
Oh, yeah. This is a really big thing, because every time he gets asked this, he doesn't give a straight answer. He will try to answer, no, well, you know, and this is important because he has all his life, he's been a campaigner, but he's never really positioned himself as a man who can run the Department of Health better than the other guys.
I can tell you what's wrong, rather than I can
And by the way,
right.
he's been the most effective campaigner in post-war politics. Look at what he's achieved.
He's the most influential politician of our generation.
But in the last few months, he's trying to repackage himself as a man of government. Now, people say, look, do you want to become Prime Minister? Here he is, you know, in his early 60s. He was having a very nice life. And does he want, you know, in 4 years' time to be wrestling with this kind of beast that nobody else has succeeded in wrestling with? I'm not sure that he does. I'm not sure that his policies stack up, but he's got a good answer to that, Julia. He will say to you, well, I understand neither me nor any of my team have really run government before, but we've now got 10 local authorities. Soon we'll have a lot more. Judge us by the results. Come back, not in 4 years, but in 1 year, he's saying. That's a short time frame. So let's see if Kent Council, on the brink of bankruptcy, has managed to have their changes. Let's see if Zia Youssef and his Doge team are able to make it, because if they are able to turn around local government, why shouldn't they be able to turn around national government?
And there is a view, I think, from it ties in with what you were saying, if you're hearing some focus groups, that actually the last two lots have been so rubbish it can't be any worse, is what the voters
This is exactly it. He is the kind of break glass in case of emergency candidate, and the voters are very well prepared to break that glass, because Starmer's saying, oh, look, if you don't like me, look at the Tories. They were saying, no, actually, we reject this idea that we need to choose between Tweedledum and Tweedledee. There is another one.
I mean, I no doubt at all that 16% in the polls, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, she gets it. She knows the threat. Right now, we're looking at, I mean, one of the polls suggesting just 3 dozen MPs or something for the 3 or 4 dozen MPs for the Tories after the next election on the current polls. Do you think that Keir Starmer gets it?
I think that what Nigel Farage is doing right now is a great national service in dangling Keir Starmer over a political cliff by his ankles and asking him if he enjoys the view. Now, If Keir Starmer doesn't get it right now, looking at this MRP poll, looking at pretty much any other poll that's come out in the last couple of months, he'll be working out either he manages to address the concerns of these reform voters, or they are absolutely prepared to replace him with Nigel Farage. Now, they're not joking here. This isn't something they tell opinion pollsters. They put reform in government in 10 local authorities. So if Starmer hasn't worked it out by now, looking at the scale of his rebellion...
and bearing in mind they weren't even votes in a lot of the counties where reform would have done better because of those delayed polls.
Exactly. So he will have to ask, is the country serious? Could they really mean it? Would they put Farage and a bunch of neophytes in if I don't deliver? The answer to the question is yes, absolutely they would.
Absolutely fascinating. Philip Ingram's listening to all of that. What do you make of it?
Fascinating. Well, I don't think Keir Starmer realises he's been dangled over the cliff, and that's part of the problem. And it's great to see that disruptors are having so much influence across the place, but our traditional political parties, and this is probably the same across Europe and elsewhere, don't know what to do, so they take out their old recipes and they just apply the same recipe again.
Also, part of the issue is they don't really think that mass immigration is a problem. For instance, they don't really think that a lot of the things that we think are massive problems are a problem.
Or they think their hands are tied and they can't really solve it. When they can, there are lots of solutions which they just simply won't reach for.
Because they want to be the nice people.
Mainstream parties are disassociated from reality. Labour is losing it in exactly the same way that the Tories lost the last election, and they're doing nothing about it. In fact, they're making it worse for themselves.
Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. Let's go back to welfare reform, because I mentioned, Fraser Nelson, your last documentary was about welfare and how a lot of people, it was classic, because there were some Labour backbench MPs going, well, I wouldn't watch this documentary because, I know his stance, he's Spectator editor, it's going to be, it's all, bashing the poorest. And in fact, it was the opposite of that. It was an incredibly sympathetic portrayal about how people get trapped on benefits, particularly disability and other benefits. What do you make of the government's bid to these welfare reforms? I mean, they're in my view, a drop in the ocean, but it looks like there's going to be a watering down of it. Do you think that the Prime Minister's got the right idea or not?
No, I think this is the mother of all missed opportunities, this. I mean, you've got one shot to change welfare. And what this does is it doesn't change. This is about saving lives more than saving money.
Yeah.
But all this does is it saves money and it doesn't save lives. Yeah. If you look at the projections, they're still expected to go up from 3.5 million on sickness benefit to 4.1 million in a few years' time. That's like the working age population of Birmingham going on sickness benefit under the existing reforms. Now, they won't be getting quite as much money, but still, when you look at the loss of talent, the loss of manpower, the damage to communities, all of that continues.
The damage to people's mental and physical health. Not working is really bad for you.
And I don't think we've done nearly enough work into working out what happens when work disappears. The kind of social, the psychological, the kind of family aspects of it. And this is going to happen on the calamitous scale, even if these reforms are passed. So they should have done it by reducing the caseload, even freezing the caseload. But instead they've got reforms which, by their own projections, will massively increase the caseload, except make these guys even more miserable position than they were going to be already. So you'd think that a Labour Party, clues in the name, would do something that would take people off welfare back into work. This does not, and it deserves to fail, I'm afraid.
Well, there you are then. He said it. Thank you very much, Fraser Nelson, Times columnist. Really appreciate you doing it. It's absolutely fascinating. That documentary is on Channel 4 tonight, dispatches at 8 o'clock. But tape it, watch it on catch up, because you're going to be listening and watching talk, aren't you? But just some breaking news for you right now. 3 people have been taken to hospital after a double-decker bus has crashed into a river in Hampshire. Emergency services were called to Bishopstoke Road in Eastleigh at about 7 minutes past 10 o'clock this morning after the Blue Star bus left the road. 3 patients were taken to hospital with, we believe, serious injuries. Another 14 treated at the scene with less serious injuries, thankfully. But goodness me, a double-decker bus crashing into the river near Eastleigh in Hampshire. We'll bring you updated on any more developments on that. Up next, then, we're going to get your calls. Love to hear your thoughts on what Fraser Nelson's had to say. Love to hear your thoughts, of course, on the Keir Starmer welfare reforms. Is he right to water them down? Should he tighten them up, or are they Goldilocks just right? Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
What an absolute mess for this Labour government. The fact that less than a year on, the MRP poll, which is sort of the gold standard poll that we use to do seat-by-seat projections, shows that they're not just going to have that majority cut, but cut significantly.
Yeah.
And they'll be pushed into second, and Reform are the ones who have the most seats. If you look at the vote share in that MRP poll, Reform is slightly ahead of Labour in terms of vote share, but in seat projection, they're miles ahead. And that is because they are appealing to all areas of the country. They're taking votes not just from the Tories, but also Labour red wall seats as well. And so that should really worry Keir Starmer.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:27 is the time. Absolutely fascinating conversation with Fraser Nelson, I have to say. I always look forward to his documentaries. He knows what he's talking about. Do you know what? If I were Nigel Farage, I'd hire him to do welfare reform. I would for a big I would.
I'm communications.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, God, Keir Starmer should hire him doing communications. I mean, there he is in absolute chaos. Tiniest bit of hopeless welfare reform, and he can't even get that through, facing this massive rebellion. That's what you're calling in about today. 0344 499 1000. Let's go straight to those calls. Mark is in Bedfordshire. A very good afternoon to you, Mark.
Good afternoon, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for calling. What do you want to tell us?
Well, this is the first time I've ever called in on a show. It's certainly not my style.
Oh, he's very brave.
But, yeah, I am feeling a bit nervous, I have to say. But I wanted to call in on welfare debate at the moment. Yeah. And obviously don't want to discuss disabled, because needless, if you're disabled, you need all the help and everyone will support these people in their lives. My biggest concern is the mental. The anxiety, the stress aspect. So without sounding like an old Monty Python sketch, I just did a background on me, really. Yeah. I'm 57. I'm now very lucky to be retired. I've suffered from mental health, anxiety throughout my whole life, and have ADHD, hyperfocus. So throughout my life, I've luckily, with hyperfocus, it's like a superpower, and I've been able to be very successful at what I do. Yeah. But it's been very difficult because you have to wear a mask, you have to adapt your behaviour, and you do go into burnout. Yeah. But my point is that I have a choice. Yeah, I had to
get on with it.
I had to get on with it, and I had to be a responsible member of society.
When you say you didn't have a choice, those benefits weren't available, it wasn't recognised, or your parents just made it clear, look, this is what you do?
Absolutely, and I think there was an awful lot of people that struggled in that way, but they weren't given a label, and they weren't card-carrying, and they weren't encouraged to be victims.
I do think the labelling is part of the problem, unless it's an extreme end where people are genuinely incapacitated by it.
Absolutely. My son, I know one of my sons is also on the spectrum like me, because he behaves. But I don't want him to go, because I said, because you'll be labelled.
And you'll be written off.
And you'll be written off. Now, my point is that some people with stress and anxiety has been with us since day one.
They're normal human emotions.
Yep, but we were taught how to deal with it, and it was basically just get up. You're no different to anyone else. Everyone has anxiety. Now, I know there's different levels, and I've had quite bad levels, but I brought up a family and was successful in a career dealing with it because I had to, and I have 3 wonderful children, and I've been with my wife nearly 40 years. But my point is, if I was in my late teens or early 20s, right now with this nanny state and these welfares, I would have been written off.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have the life I've got.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And again, it's almost like tough love is what's needed rather than what we're getting at the moment. Mark, first-time caller, thank you very much. Please do call in again. Thank you very much. I'm 57 as well. I'm not retired. He's done well. He's done well for him. Let's get to Philip, who's on the line in Dorset, also wants to talk about welfare reform. Good afternoon to you, Philippa.
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Lovely to speak to you today. I'm really passionate about this reform bill. I'm glad that it's getting a lot of backlash from a lot of different MPs and from the media and all sorts of things. I'm only hoping that it's going to be Keir Starmer's equivalent of poll tax, as poll tax.
So you're opposed to these reforms?
Well, basically, as I've called him before and we've spoken about this before, I've got cerebral palsy. I've had it since birth. I was £2 2 ounces. I basically shouldn't be here. And I've just got on with things throughout my life. I'm now 55, so we're of a similar age. And basically, when the equivalent of PIP first came in 1979...
Disability living allowance, was it DLA then?
Yeah, but it was something else even before that. And basically, I had to go to an assessment centre, and they had to work out from when I was 8 years old what I would be like as an adult with cerebral palsy, and whether I would. But that's what they did. Yeah. That's what they did. They tried to work out from physiotherapists, from doctors, from all that kind of thing, what I'd be like. And then I was given it as a lifetime award.
Yeah.
So I've had a car since I was 16 years old. Yeah. And the reason why this benefit is there is nothing to do with sickness. You need to take away the sickness equivalent out of the disability benefits. Disability benefits are something separate for people who've actually got a disability that doesn't change over their lifetime, or in fact gets worse. Yeah. The point of a disability benefit is to help disabled people be on a level playing field with their non-disabled.
And we should all support that. Yeah. Level of the grace of God. I wasn't born with cerebral palsy. I don't have those extra needs that you have, and we should help you with them.
And basically, there's two problems with this.
Okay.
The first problem is that the disability benefits and the PIP now is basically like an umbrella thing, like if you've got multiple different kinds of disabilities,
so it's too broad.
Anybody can get it.
Yeah.
And when I was a child, it was about your physical mobility needs, whether you could get about or not, and what help you needed for that, and what care you needed. That was it. And now, since lockdown, everybody's got on the disability bandwagon, and that's why the bill's gone up so much. So they need to go back to basics, and they need to stop reassessing people who've got lifelong disabilities, because that's costing them money.
That's an unnecessary thing, but we need to be properly assessing the people who are coming new on it. Philip, I so appreciate a call. Always appreciate speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a quick break. 12:34 is the time. Up next, going to talk about was that NATO summit a success for Daddy Trump, and we're also going to be talking about fines for moving into a yellow box junction. Is it a money-making scam? £1 million made from just a handful of yellow boxes, or are those the fines that we want to be handed out? We'll talk to Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK, about that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:35 it is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer, and let's find out what our next guest has to say. And Philip, I'd love to hear what you make of what he has to say. He's Rick Gates. He's a former deputy campaign chairman for Donald Trump back in 2016, and he joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Rick.
Good to be with you, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about that NATO summit, which has been hailed as a great success by everybody. We'd had Keir Starmer in the House of Commons. Occasionally he wanders back into Britain to actually try and attempt to run the country. When Donald Trump's arrived home to a tweet from his own White House saying, "Daddy's home." First of all, I must ask you, and I know this is only sort of periphery stuff, it's not the substance, but what did you make of the daddy analogy? And let's have a little watch and listen for those who somehow have managed to miss it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's watch and listen.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get
use strong. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
Well, he was talking about Israel and Iran, of course. Rick Gateson, what did you make of that analogy?
Well, here in the United States, most of us are looking at Marco Rubio's reaction during the press conference yesterday when a Sky News reporter asked that very question. From our perspective, it is quite humorous, but I think it also shows kind of the charm offensive that NATO and Mark Rutte in particular were trying to put on, for Donald Trump. They always haven't gotten along. Yeah. There's been issues, but I think, in terms of President Trump's signature issue, even back from 2016 when he wanted European countries to pay more in NATO fees, yeah. No, guess what? He got that yesterday. So, yeah, absolutely resounding success for him over there. And then obviously on the sidelines meeting with President Zelensky, I think that meeting went well, certainly better than the one in the White House.
I mean, it's a low bar. It's a low bar, Rick. But yeah, I mean, again, I've got another clip actually, but we'll move on from that. The reporter asking him about whether he regards his NATO allies as kind of children. You say it's a big win, 5%. It's not on defence. It's not a percentage of GDP going on defence. It includes 1.5% of that is on security, like border security. A third runway at Heathrow would count as that. Us actually stopping some migrants into the country on Channel boats from Calais would count as that. And even the 3% that we're planning, 3.5 we're planning to spend, even that includes stuff that doesn't have any contribution towards our fighting ability. Is this all just smoke and mirrors and everyone playing your president?
Yeah, look, I think we'll see over time. I think, that was another question, what's going to happen after, President Trump's out of office? Is NATO really going to adhere to this new policy? So I think time will tell. But I think from the American perspective, one of the things that we were frustrated about is that it seemed like America was bearing the burden, the financial burden for NATO.
Well, you were. You are.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, paying up to 2/3 of the amount. So at least now from whether it's optical or whether it's a practical and it comes to fruition, the Americans are seeing this as a huge win for Donald Trump. And more importantly, the campaign promise that Americans' burden would be reduced. And now with the economic situation the way it is, it's a good thing for Americans.
Well, indeed. It was a wake-up call for Europe as well about needing to provide our own defence. In terms of where we are with Iran and Israel, we've had some glorious statements from the Iranian Ayatollah, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, basically praising the victory for Iran, insisting that the Americans have, he said, we've delivered a hand slap to America's face, and that Donald Trump needed to exhibit his showmanship, but the US couldn't achieve much when they struck Iran's nuclear sites. They could not achieve anything, could not reach the goal they sought, and they exaggerate to conceal the truth and keep it hidden. He said, and the aggression against Iran, he warned, will come at a great cost. Tough words from the Ayatollah, but do you think they could be matched by action?
Not from not Iran, absolutely not. I don't think they have much weaponry left. I think they have, some maybe ballistic missiles. But I think at the end of the day, look, you're making these type of statements. We're talking about it here in the U.S. It's very reminiscent of Iraq. Remember when Saddam Hussein said it's going to be the mother of all battles? Yeah. And then as soon as the U.S. tanks roll in, everybody surrenders.
6 weeks, I think it took, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of over here. That's how we're portraying it. Look, their military capabilities are absolutely diminished. Their nuclear capabilities, in the words of President Trump, are obliterated. We'll get more intelligence on that as the days unfold. But at the end of the day, also telegraphing the missile launch, on the air base in Qatar, and kind of then
that was a pretend response, wasn't it?
Exactly right. And so all those indicators lead to, if they were really going to do something, then either why not do it, or do you even have the capability to do it? And I think the consensus is they don't. So the question is, what's going to happen inside of Iran? That's kind of what we're all waiting for. You have kind of the political elites that seem to be very frustrated and tired of the Ayatollah. You hear about, him potentially making a deal with Russia to, exile there. I think the next few days are going to be very critical to that. But look, I think this is all rhetoric. I think whatever the Ayatollah thinks he has to do to remain in power is probably where this rhetoric is coming from. But it's very, very light, and I think it's falling on deaf ears. I
had got into a little bit of a little spat with Sebastian Gorka, senior aide to Donald Trump, yesterday about, one thing I find so frustrating with Donald Trump is he's totally bang on 100% right when it comes to Israel and the threat from Iran. I love his support for Israel. He's so clear-cut, it's a black and white issue. I don't understand why he doesn't understand that Ukraine is also a black and white issue, and that he should be supporting Ukraine, and that the same sort of show of force to Iran would also would work with Putin in Russia as well. Why does he see Ukraine's predicament? And he was very sympathetic to Ukrainian journalists who said that, she and her daughter had left the country. She was asking him at the NATO press conference yesterday, but her husband was a soldier in Ukraine. He was very supportive. Everyone felt there was quite a softening. He was much less disparaging of Zelensky and Ukraine and what the situation was. There's been a bit more calling out of Vladimir Putin. But why does he not see Ukraine in the same way that he sees Israel?
Well, look, I think part of it is historical in the way that he approached these two issues. At the time of his first administration, there wasn't this war between Ukraine and Russia, and he felt that they'd
already invaded Crimea.
Right. Well, remember, that was under Obama. That was not under.
Yeah, I know, but they had already invaded Crimea.
Yeah. So they absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, President Trump is growing frustrated with Vladimir Putin, no question about it. And I think that you are going to see, more action. There's talk about another round of sanctions on President Putin and a lot of his allies. So look, I think it's there. Look, I think the president wanted to see this resolved as quickly as possible. Clearly, that hasn't happened. You saw him make a comment about that yesterday.
Well, saying, he was told, for 24 hours he was going to resolve it. He said, it was sarcasm.
And look, I think at the end of the day, there will be some sort of resolution at some point. But unlike the Ayatollah, who basically has resigned to the fact that he has zero military capabilities and looks to be surrendering, even though he's not going to use that reference, Vladimir Putin doesn't. He's a different guy. It's a sign of weakness. The minute Vladimir Putin shows any sign of weakness, you know this from the region, it's strength. And if he doesn't project strength, he's going to get ousted by his own people at some juncture. So I think that there's another game here, and I don't think Russia can maintain what they're doing. I mean, look at what they're bringing in from North Korea. They don't have the resources. I think one of the most surprising things the world saw when this war broke out is how diminished Russia's military capabilities are.
Yes.
Even though they have a big nuclear arsenal, their kind of ground forces became pretty irrelevant.
I mean, and their losses compared to the Ukrainians are quite astonishing, aren't they? Just coming back to Donald Trump and back in America, he's back in the country. He's been at the G7 summit. He's been at the NATO summit. They know they shorten these summits because they know he's not interested in all these supranational bodies, and he's much more in like one-on-one deals and like. How is all of this going down with the American people in terms of the polling, in terms of how he's handled what he's done with Israel, what he's doing with Ukraine? How is this all going down?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Israel-Iran thing was pretty interesting. Going into it, before a decision was made, there seemed to be a lot of, animosity, a lot of opposition to it. Then when he made the decision to go in, drop the bombs, the success has been resounding. Like, a lot of Americans are siding with him, not on the idea of going to war. And even President Trump says, we don't want to go to war. We don't want to put boots on the ground. I think he's navigated this pretty deftly in terms of taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities, but at the same time making sure that commitment not to go to war has been in the main messaging. And so far, the polling is very good in his favor. Now we turn back to domestic issues. We're getting ready to pass our big budget bill, our one big, beautiful budget bill, hopefully this weekend. And that will be the focus moving forward. Look, we have midterms in about a year and a half. That is all going to be really based on the economy and what that state is here in America.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always the economy, stupid. There we are. Thank you very much. It's good to talk to you, Rick Gates. He's a former deputy campaign chair for Donald Trump back in 2016. Can I come to you, Philip Ingram, in terms of talking about the success or not in Iran? We had these claims that the nuclear sites had been obliterated. Then we were told that the uranium had been sort of disappeared off in the days beforehand. Then we had that internal report that was leaked saying that actually just put back the nuclear program by maybe a few months. Today, or overnight, we've had the CIA report saying there was a lot of damage. Who do we believe, and how does anyone know? Because unless you're actually presumably there, you don't know what you've destroyed, surely. Well,
exactly. Intelligence is assessment, and it's very easy whenever things get leaked for elements to be taken out of context and then used as this shows that we haven't done it.
We might have seen that in the dodgy dossier.
A classic example was the dodgy dossier, the 45-minute rule, because I saw the intelligence, and the intelligence was right, and it said 45 minutes, but it caveated it only when weapons have been outloaded, authority had been passed down, and stocks were sitting in front of the guns. And then went on to say none of this has happened. All of that was taken out whenever the dossier went to become the dodgy dossier. Yeah. So I actually believe Donald Trump. I believe the bomb damages that's coming in. You will have set the program back, because it's not just the depleted uranium itself, it's the ability to process it into weapons.
It turns out it's much harder than a lot of people think. Yes. And I know it's 60%, it's not 90%, which is what you actually need. But
you need the specialist kits,
the 60% is the hardest bit.
Yeah.
You need but you're never going to get rid of the know-how, the knowledge. Correct. You can get it. They can pay new scientists.
The best quote I saw on social media was, "You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube."
This is so true.
So they've got the knowledge. Even if they've got the uranium, they may not have the centrifuges to get it to 90%.
You need to have people in power who don't want to annihilate Israel and Western civilization.
Yes.
That would be a good start. But there'll still be plenty of others who do.
Correct.
But you do need many billions, and you do need the know-how, and you need as many checks on this happening.
And there's a danger that another country may give Iran a nuclear warhead, and this is where the intelligence agencies will be monitoring it very, very closely indeed.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Up next, to talk about something that, well, it's rather less important than the prospect of World War III nuclear war, and that's parking fines, driving fines, because the motorist, of course, has become the cash cow for local councils starved of central government funds. But new revelation that drivers were fined a total of £1 million last year for just 36 different yellow box junctions. Getting there, when the lights check, you get that fine. But is that fair? Is that right? Or motorists just the cash cow? We'll talk about that up next with Howard Cox. This is Talk.
I think it's all about the comparatives, isn't it? And when you've got, as I said in the House of Commons today, when you've got shoplifters, robbers, thieves, muggers, drug dealers, and the likes getting lesser sentences to go to jail or no jail sentences, maybe something suspended, you sort of say, well, this comparison is wrong. And if you had a system where sentences were very, very long, and this was a normal sentence for a hideous offensive tweet, well, that's in the normal comparisons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:49 is the time. Well, let's talk right now about the motorists as cash cows, because this is an extraordinary stat that's come out. Motorists last year were fined almost £1 million for just one type of road traffic offence. It's only been enforced outside of London and Cardiff for the last 3 years under new rules to extend the, well, many are calling the war on motorists. A staggering £998,000 of penalty charge notices were issued to drivers in 2024 for one specific infringement, and that was, well, basically driving into and getting stuck on one of those yellow boxes at a junction when the lights go to red. Well, let's talk about this with Howard Cox. He's founder of Fairfield UK and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Howard.
Hello, Julie. Lovely to speak.
Lovely to speak to you. Now, listen, I don't like drivers being used as cash cows. I don't like the whole 20-mile-per-hour zones on major thoroughfares. Where of course, it's reasonable to drive at 30 miles per hour, and they're making it harder and harder for people to park. But if there's one fine I'm happy for people to get, it's getting stuck on a yellow junction, a yellow box, and blocking the road for other people. In fact, I would go further than fines. I'd bring in snipers.
Oh, I love you, Julia. Now, look, I mean, yellow boxes should be there for guidance, keeping traffic moving. And you're dead right. If you actually do block them, you should be penalised. But not as a revenue-generating scheme. They should be just warned and told, hey, are you aware of the fact that if you enter that box and you block the other basic oncoming traffic or people turning right or left, you should be penalised.
How many times should you get warned for not obeying the highway code, and when you pass your test you know you're not allowed to be on a yellow box? If you can't see a full car's distance after the yellow box, you know you're not supposed to drive onto it if the lights are likely to change.
Well, my feeling is that the point is that most of these boxes are too big already. They're 50% larger in most across the country at the moment. That's what this research, and that stinks of just revenue generation.
So they've actually made the boxes large. They're basically deliberately trying to catch people out.
Absolutely right. And some people make a mistake. Yeah. I've been stranded. I'm not stranded, but I've definitely had half my car across the start of the box. I didn't stop anyone. But in these new rules, it's giving licence to local authorities to actually penalise you. And let's face it, they need the money. Where else are they going to get the money from but cash?
And we've seen this again and again, haven't we? Because the commitments that councils have, and they're required to spend a certain amount of money, and lots of particular funds, they're ring-fenced for social care and especially educational needs and all of that. But they haven't had an increase in money from central government. Although council tax goes up a lot for us, 5%, it doesn't cover the extra costs they've got. They've got to find the cash from somewhere. And motorists are a really, really easy way of getting it. It's happening across the board, isn't it? Residents, parking, fines, parking costs, all of that.
Absolutely right. And this is a gift for local authorities. You can do it because very few motorists contest these things. You can appeal, but it's basically the fine's 70 quid if you go into a box and 35 if you pay within 14 days. So what's the point in going through all the hassle? So it's an easy cash grab. Yeah. And one of the things you made the point about the fact what's happening now with the defence expenditure going up to, do we say 5%, whatever it's going to be, where they're going to get the money from? They're going to get it from motorists. And in the budget in August, I promise you, my 15 years of a freezing fuel duty will probably come to an end. And it's going to go up by a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be in August. It'd be probably October. They're going to probably delay it as much as they can. But here's the thing. You've been campaigning on that issue. It's how I first met you many, many years ago on that issue. And it's one of those things where, to a certain extent, it's almost, I mean, it's not a fake campaign. It's just because of the campaign, we know it's just politically untenable for a government to give in on that. But do you think this is the one time they're going to go, what can we do? We have to raise fuel duty.
Well, I think the usual adage is one is you've got the net zero argument and you've got 15 years of a freeze. So it's about time you motorists have to pay for something, even though motorists are paying £1 billion a week to this government, £50 billion a year. That's what they're paying. So come on, give it a break. Motorists they should be seen as an incentive to the economy. As a cash cow.
Yeah, they're seen as, it's fascinating how much motorists are seen as a problem. And again, I think there are two issues there. One is that lots of people making policy don't understand that everything we buy, everything that is sold, everything that's made in this country at some point is moved by road. Even if it's moved, from one end of the country to the other by rail, it has to come on and get off by lorry or truck. And therefore, every single penny extra on transport costs just becomes an extra cost for us. But also so many people making policies, so many people, especially the young people advising governments, they work in central London, they get the tube or they cycle to work, lovely. They don't live the life that most people in this country live, where 80% of people rely on their car every single day to get to work, get the kids to school, to get anything done.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better, Julia. You've got it spot on. And that's why I've been campaigning for 15 years. I keep saying I'm going to stop doing this because, I'm an old git now. The point is, what we've got to get to the stage now is we need people like you to keep shouting on behalf of the motorists. We're not horrible people. We're not the pariahs. We are delivering for the economy, literally. And that's a pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the problem. I don't think Labour are going to change them. I mean, Tories were just as bad. But at the end of the day, they're going to say we're going to have to raise money somehow. And people will say, well, if you still want, a little old lady in your street to get, her carer coming to us, but you're going to have to pay for it. We're going to have to put our council tax up. That's what they're going to say.
Well, as I've said before, it's a social cohesion thing. Community, going to see your family, going out, going off to, spend money in restaurants, the theatre. Especially when you can't get back after the last bus has gone or the last train's gone. You need the safety. And there's the one thing in London, inside a car, you're safe. You're not safe walking down the high street in London at 11 o'clock at night.
A lot of people absolutely do feel that, I can tell you that. Howard Cox, always good to talk to you, founder of Fairfield UK. Thank you very much indeed. Philip Ingram's still with us. I mean, look, I think one of the biggest problems with these yellow box junctions and is actually, I think a lot of people are just very angry and frustrated when they drive. I am not a calm driver. This will not surprise you. The few times I drive, but people are very inconsiderate, very thoughtless.
Yep.
And so people go, well, you're going to get, well, I'm going to get in the way, and people don't just do that sort of, that thing when you're waiting when it's a narrow junction, and you have to get someone's part,
and you act like a zipper.
Yeah, and you can just, and again, even if all two lanes going down to one, but it's really obvious. You just let every other car could move in. It's so obvious, and then you get people going, no, I'm not going to let you in.
People ignore the highway code. As soon as they've passed their test, then they seem to forget everything that's in it. And this is where penalising people is one way of dealing with it. I agree it should not become a cash cow. And I think we need to, if the motorists are going to be hit with more money, there needs to be a massive investment in public transport outside London.
Oh, absolutely. And also dealing with the roads everywhere. The potholes are just an absolute, I mean, they're an absolute joke now. They really, really are. But also, again, it's one of those things whenever you go abroad and you fill up at the petrol station, you go, how much? Are you kidding me? I mean, you cannot get over how much cheaper fuel is when you're feeling like when you're in France or you're in America, you've got a hire car. It's unbelievable how much more tax we pay on these things.
Oh, when was the last time you filled up the continent? The fuel prices are...
Yeah, but they're nothing like ours.
Are significantly more than ours in many countries.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking France is most pissed off, and it's not been an issue at all.
Ireland, Scandinavia, Germany... significantly more than fuel here.
Well, very well then. He told me. Philip Ingram, thank you so much for having you coming here. Always so great to have you on the show. Ian Collins is here as well. Tell us what's happening on his show.
Do you remember back in the day? I know you're 17 years older than me, but do you remember, Julia, when they used to give stuff away when you bought petrol, like glasses?
Oh God, yeah.
You could get glasses. Green shield. Apparently in Saudi.
That's where my husband gets all the anniversary flowers from.
That's where the flowers come from. Apparently in Saudi, that's what they still do. They give stuff. It's so cheap, the petrol.
Just take something else.
You've got to come to us. Come here. And talking to the highway code, you know, my cousin failed a driving test because she saw her mate walking down the road, honked the horn and waved
Brilliant.
at her.
Brilliant. I went through a red light in one of my tests.
Yeah, well, there you go, you see. That's likely to...
And I speeded in another. Sped? I don't know.
Okay, yeah. That's likely to mark you down, isn't it?
Felt the first three, yeah.
Anyway, one of these woes pale into insignificance as to what our Prime Minister is facing. The big rebellion. Are they going to water this thing down? And of course, as you've been discussing...
They're going to U-turn, aren't they?
Yeah, but the trouble is with that, as you've already touched on brilliantly, is that somebody else is going to pay for the gap, and that's going to be everyone else.
But here's the thing. I mean, I just don't know tenable it is this government within not even a year in government, massive U-turns on major policies.
Yes,
the man has no spine.